This is the Infinite Plane Saturn Day. I guess this is the return of open phones. So the idea with Infinite Plane Saturn Day is reviewing the past week and talking about anything and taking calls on pretty much anything, obviously related to what we're always talking about. And I don't really have to put down any rules. I think we all know the guidelines here. Open phones for open minds doesn't mean that every idea is equally valid and deserving of platforming. The open mind means that we tolerate perspectives that are from outside of the closed informational system of mainstream or alternative. I would say systems, but it's a duopoly. It's actually one and the same. Yeah, if you didn't know, Trutherville is controlled opposition. Like, we were all controlled opposition at one point. To what? Well, to the mainstream. We were one side in the duopoly, aimed at each other. Some people are still there. The Plato's cave dwellers. I've been saying Plato's cave dwellers or Plato's cave syndrome is something I've encountered quite a bit, because my tweet about the 9/11 coding in the UPS crash has received 500,000 impressions, which again is pretty big considering the size of my Twitter account. And it has brought in a lot of subscribers. I mean, I gained dozens of subscribers over the last few days on Twitter. And on Substack, I've picked up at least 15 or 20 people on Substack. So I want to say thanks to all of you who are subscribing. You will be getting notifications when we're live. And I also resumed uploading archives. I uploaded 9 tracks. That's 11 hours and 9 minutes, mostly of me monologuing, except for a brief call with Kevin Mooring, who called to tell us about the exploding car in the Bronx that injured firefighters and how that too seemed 9/11-y. Well, throw in the grounded flights, the white powder. If you didn't know, if you didn't follow it, the day Cheney died, there was a sequence of events, and he died on 11/3, which of course is the day the One World Trade Tower opened that replaced the twins. But after he died, it just seemed like it was 9/11 all over again. Like we had a flashback collectively. And this wasn't just a subjective thing. The flashback was, in fact, concerted messaging from seemingly every possible media outlet. So, for example, we had the mayor of New York and the whole political race now being framed by the right as the return of Osama bin Laden, and terrorism suddenly becomes a hot topic again as Cheney dies, and he's considered by many to be the architect of 9/11. So it brings back this wave of 9/11 stuff. And then we saw nothing but Twin Towers exploding all over X. Even Mayor Giuliani, he's like, you guys must have forgot about this because look who you elected. And I was just thinking, this is too deliberate. Plane crashing. And the reason why we associated the plane crashing with 9/11 was I had noted that the flight number happened to match the number of casualties. And then I was like, wait a minute, this whole thing seems to be 9/11 coded. And sure enough, it went up 175 feet before it hit the building. Oh, like flight 175, the one that hit the second tower. The scene itself was very reminiscent of the Pentagon, even the profile shot. The theme all around, though, just had echoes of Dick Cheney. And then people are just pointing out the irony of a plane going down when New York City elects a Muslim mayor. And that by no means is an exhaustive list of all the correlations. It was like 9 dead, 11 injured. And the numbers have since changed, but they were flashing that number, blasting it on Drudge. So it was pretty undeniable that there were a series of coincidences that encompassed the crash, tied it into Dick Cheney, connected to 9/11, and correlated with the mayoral race. All of this came together, followed by a car exploding, injuring firemen. Somebody got sent white powder, and a whole bunch of airplanes have been grounded since. Some will say that we need to touch grass, that we're making too many connections. This is hyper dot connecting, I was told by somebody. Well, that's one way of looking at it. I'm just glad that we can meet halfway and agree that we're looking at coincidences. We can debate as to whether or not these are intentional. And the reason why most people balk at the idea that these are intentional is that they don't have a framework in terms of how they process media in which these things could all be uniformly projected, as in what I call concerted messaging. Like, how can this all be connected? And that's because the compartmentalization is a big hoax. I mean, that's how they fool these people. A lot of people have been fooled because they falsely believe that there are meaningful distinctions to be made between entertainment and news. It's part of the same bread and circuses. And then some will say, well, how is that even possible? Did you not live through 9/11 or decades of mass shootings? Did you not live through 2020? Like, have you not noticed that the media itself has been, this uniformly consistent liar? I mean, it has consistently been using psyops. We're always talking about psyops, and even people who are aware of psyops are like, that can't be real. And they say that at first. They always say it right away. Like, right away. Like, oh, how can you make that connection? It's like, do you not see subtexts in movies? I mean, this is good writing. But they say it right away. It's like, no, this can't be real. It has to be coincidences. There's no intentionality. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And I'm like, just wait. They're like, oh, you're crazy for connecting the 9/11 death toll to the UPS flight crashing into a building on the day Cheney dies. Oh, I'm crazy for that? I'm sorry, but that's just too ironic not to notice. Then you throw in the Muslim mayor and the exploding car, injured firemen, and all these other facets pile in. And I'm like, it seems like we kind of have a point. So now here's the difference, though, because some people are like, well, this is obviously strange. And they walk away in the fog of Psywar. Like, I'm confused. I don't know what to think. I don't know how to process this. But the people who notice it and think it's intentional are crazy. But since I don't think that, I'm not crazy, even though I can't explain it. And this is what I mean by posturing as though confusion or ambiguity is some kind of insight. It's actually not. It means that you're basically admitting that you can't figure it out, that the intellect can't do it. That's why so many lean into simulation nonsense, which is essentially an appeal to the divine. Like, I can't explain it, so there must be some kind of higher power involved. Oh, by the way, I noticed a lot of people were connecting this with a 76? They're connecting this to a flight. I think it was AA flight 191, some analogous thing. Oh, and then here's something else, because we talk about hoax indicators like predictive programming or concurrent media, like the political race that somehow tie into it, the death of Cheney. So we talk about the media ecosystem. Is there this echo chamber effect? But one of our hoax indicators are there drills. Have there been drills in a vicinity for the exact same thing? And guess what we find? Yep. At the site of the crash, there was a massive drill that involved 150 casualty simulators. We're talking people drenched in fake blood with squibs and bones sticking out. A bunch of people playing dead at an airport simulating a plane crashing. So I'm looking at that as another hoax indicator. And you can find the articles about it. So if you were quick to say we had no point, I would say you didn't have enough information to dismiss what we were suggesting here, that we're still in the discovery phase. So I wouldn't jump to judge something as not plausible if you haven't looked at the facts. That's why I really argue against the use of incredulity as opposed to skepticism. So the public is taught to be credulous, which means they automatically believe the mainstream, but they're taught to be incredulous against anything non-mainstream. And what this really means is that they aren't processing it. They're pretty much defaulting it. Thus the term auto hoaxer or auto believer. We're talking about the way that people process things. The auto hoaxer isn't automatically calling it a hoax, but they're automatically applying a assessment, a certain type of an assessment, which involves skepticism, suspending judgment. We co-opted that phrase. I just caught a mosquito. I opened my hand and it flew away. I'm sorry, but my kill rate has been pretty good. These things are psychotic. I've been dealing with them. And I just find that they're really easy to catch compared to flies. And I just caught one and I opened my hand and he got away. Dark Ghost Wind says, what was Ma'am Danny doing at age 33? Someone was asking about anagrams, by the way. That's a pretty good one. Madman. This is how the media has characterized it from the right. They made it seem like terrorism's on the way because of this. It's just xenophobia. But anyway, we just lived through a flashback of 9/11 with the plane, Cheney, the stuff in New York. The way they recall things, it just seems really interestingly like ironic, eerily coincidental. There's some intrigue here. Even if there was no intentionality, I would still say, hey, that's amazing. How ironic, how funny. God's got a sense of humor because Dick Cheney dies and then a plane falls and hits a building as New York's taken over by ISIS. Oh, yeah, that's right. It was at the Muhammad Ali airport. And then you had Muhammad Ali, the terrorist in Dearborn, Michigan, trying to do an ISIS-style attack. So it goes deeper. We haven't really even scratched the surface, but I'm bringing up the drills. The fact that this happened following mass casualty simulations right there. I've always noted, and I said this last week, I said, have you noticed that whenever they do drills for something, it seems like that specific location is ill prepared for when it happens. Like, yeah, 33 kids just got shot and we were just doing drills. Well, your drills aren't working. And it seems like if they do something in a drill form, it's going to happen for real. I said that last week. So then we find out, yeah, they were actually doing drills at the airport for what just happened. So what was the point? Well, there's a number of ways we could go with this. I mean, none of us know for sure, but we can kind of surmise based on what we've been shown. And I think it's tied to Cheney. And I jokingly said that Cheney got a 9/11 themed Viking funeral and they incinerated his cadaver in that thing, and it was remote controlled. But considering the wider ecosystem and the election of that particular mayor, it's all scripted. I mean, we can't fall into the delusion that world stage politics are, quote, real in any sense. It's just a steam valve. It's the illusion of control, but we don't have any. We're up against an incontestable power that has hijacked the critical thinking faculties of billions when it comes to media. Like, I have nothing to say about people's expertise in any other area of their lives. But when it comes to media, that's a weak spot. It's a vulnerability that we all have been programmed. We've all been programmed with mind aids. That is a compromised mental immune system that cannot distinguish between real and fake. And it's only getting worse. Yeah, Giuliani was in the news and he was like, you guys forgot about this. The New York mayor's birthday to Donald's inauguration is 33 years. Yeah, I saw some number stuff. Yeah, Plain Dakota says, are these Bill Gates' mosquitoes? Which ones are those? Because, I mean, in 2020, I was told by some anti-pokies that the mosquitoes were going to give me the vax. I'm like, you guys are just paranoid. I'm so glad that's over. And I don't think they're bringing it back. There's so many nothing, like the nothing burger in space. What is it, 3i Atlas? Well, most of the reports, it's changing colors, it's going in different directions, it's coming towards us. That's just X engagement bait. There's nothing to really corroborate with that. Let's Go says, thinking more about the PSYOP industrial complex, I realized that entertainment and government are the same thing. Hollywood is government. All MSM and art is government. Yeah, the way I would describe it is exactly like that. That entertainment and even religion, entertainment, religion, and news media are instruments of government. And ultimately, there's only one government. And another big part of this whole program is the triangulation. We always talk about the duopoly, the mainstream, the alt, woke left, woke right, the political horseshoe. Yeah, there's this duality here, but it's being controlled by the third party that steers them against each other. And there's a framework here that's, I think, specifically based upon the psychology of interpersonal control, as in this relationship between the media consumers and the media itself has a certain dynamic that they've put into place. I mean, I do call it the church of state for a reason. Kevin Mooring says the plane in Kentucky was taken out of service and given to the UPS at 9 years and 11 days. Yeah, I noticed a lot of people went into the weeds there, and this is not cherry picking. This whole thing was encoded. That's why I said it was highly significant that it happens after Cheney, the height, the altitude that it went, it all tied to 9/11 very closely. And when it came to the death toll and everything, it's kind of interesting because the FBI has 2976. There's like 2977. Some people want to add the terrorists, but I put that tweet out there, pretty simple, just showing, hey, look, this plane just hit and it has the 9/11 death toll, and it got 500,000 hits. Now, a few people have gone through that thread and created videos based on it. No one has arrived at the correct conclusion. Like I saw one big account on X. I think it's like some of these Twitter accounts with millions of followers, and he has this poster full of predictive programming examples for 9/11, and he says the attack was planned way in advance. I'm like, no, you're like halfway in the matrix. The fake event was planned way in advance. Why is that so hard? The fake event was planned in advance. The drill was planned in advance, not the real attack. But that's what you will find. The bigger the channel, the more orthodox their opinions will be. They will be alt media, boilerplate, copy pasta, lockstep with everybody else. Just red pill trutherisms. There's no original thinking. It's super predictable. And it's kind of strange. You see Candace Owens, she's the #1 podcast in the world. It's like, why do you think that is? Well, because the CK assassination is the new JFK. The JFK thing kicked off the conspiracy culture of people now being called conspiracy theorists because they're going against the mainstream. And it really, I think, began this nonstop process of getting alternative thinkers into these rabbit trails paved for them by the intelligence agencies. Dark Ghost Wind says Trutherville still rambling about EBT. Yeah, that's something too I called out earlier. I said there's not going to be any issues with that. It's all just class warfare rhetoric to make people mad. Because you look at Mar-a-Lago, Caligula, what is it? Their whole party was themed like the Great Gatsby or something. But they're showing opulence, golden sinks, golden toilets, revamping the East Wing, Lincoln's bathroom revamped. They're showing the lunches that they eat there, how each one has these huge, chunks of lobster and all this stuff. And they're saying, while your EBT is being cut, they're eating like kings. I saw a bunch of No Kings protesters today on the way to the grocery store. Really cheap, shoddy signage, by the way, not very inspiring. And they're like, dump Trump. Like, it's too late. You're saddled with him for a couple more years. The signage is not impressive. It's like, he's a fascist. It's like, these people must have been doing this for years. It's just a cult at this point. I didn't give them a honk. You're supposed to honk your horn if you agree, I think. I just ignore it. You want to walk around with an old school analog meme, be my guest. You'll get more impressions on Twitter. Like, if they haven't noticed, apparently, the people on the street who are protesting haven't realized that their influence has waned compared to online bots. The bot armies are far more influential right now than boots on the ground. And I've been thinking about how AI agents could easily target people indirectly. You know how easy it would be if they wanted to influence you. Let's say you're spouting an opinion that the power structure doesn't like. Well, one way they could go after that is not only targeting you, because you might not buy it, you might not be influenceable by them, but they might influence people in your circle. Like, imagine AI bots swarming your spouse, getting her into an opinion antagonistic to yours. I mean, I don't think we know how exploitable this thing really is. I've really been kind of thinking through, and I think we're open to something. Dark Ghost Wind says, why are there millions of Twitter posts with people with Charlie Kirk's face deep faked onto them? Oh, I haven't seen that. Kirkianity's out of hand. And there are people who are like, I've been watching Charlie Kirk for years. He's very legitimate. I'm like, you people are sheep. Like, I knew this early on when I saw scandals hitting the different religions. It's like these people are just fools when it comes to these authority figures in fancy costumes on platforms. There are people who cannot separate the character from the world stage, and they're trying to figure this out. He seems so legit. Well, just because you agreed with them doesn't mean he legitimately believed these things. It's very easy to LARP. I can pretend to be woke left. I can pretend to be woke right. I've studied these characters on the fringes enough to where I know their talking points. I used to listen to far left podcasts, and then I'd contrast them going far right. That's why I was already familiar with Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, Nick Fuentes, and all these others, because I've been trying to really pin down what their point of views are. And if you listen to enough, you can kind of see how they're guardrailed. You can see the difference between Laura Loomer, who has been characterized as a crazy conspiracy theorist, and Candace Owens, who has also been characterized as a crazy conspiracy theorist. From an outside perspective, they might seem like the same, but they're actually not. They're diametrically opposed in something very significant. We see these various characters out there who are playing roles, but they're so good at it that people get fooled. It's like, okay, Charlie Kirk was a construct. The script for his assassination would necessarily have been produced prior to the first occurrence of the predictive programming or the commercial. You see the commercial for the future movie. I mean, these predictive programming instances are in fact tantamount to commercials. It's product placement. And what we have pointed out, and we started this with the History Benders series, and I'm going to continue this, is that if you go to a particular event and then you do a diagram and just connect, well, how many common denominators are there between each of these instances of predictive programming? And you trace those back, and the earliest instance should give you an idea of when abouts the thing was scripted and scheduled. So imagine 1997, there's a script for the Charlie Kirk event. And like, yeah, in 2025, we're going to do this. I mean, that sounds like science fiction to some people, but there are a lot of people who are very much open to retroactively manipulating history, but the future manipulation of history is what really is difficult. So if you can grasp news benders, then history benders shouldn't be a stretch. But I'd like to point out that if you accept the premise, or if you observed and you've noticed that there are fake events that are passed off as real, consistently becoming part of our historic narrative, you have to admit every one of these was scheduled in advance. 2 weeks, probably longer, a couple months, years. The point of it is we're only debating how far in advance. And our research and observations have already determined with, I would say it would necessarily be true that many of these events are decades in the planning, specifically 9/11. But this Charlie Kirk thing's no different. So what if Newsbenders isn't just 5 years in advance, but it's 33 years in advance or something? Like, that's not difficult to make the case for when you look at this model appropriately, which is the world stage as a construct, just like history is a construct, but the world stage is the now as accepted by the consensus and as broadcast back to us. And again, when we look at it from an outsider perspective, knowing that the entire infrastructure of it has been distorted by systemic fakery for a long time. Kevin Mooring says, Candace being promoted by CIA money. Plain Dakota says, I think IPS think tank is tip of the spear. These other Trutherville people are just way behind the marathon of alt info. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we might as well accept it. So what we have brought to the table here is we've taken these conversations that have been going in circles for years, and we investigated them, we tested them, and we ruled out a lot of things. We realized the alternative thinkers, the so-called truthers, have been given a bad operating system. You know, real or false flag, which is a variant of real. And the red pills have always existed within the political horseshoe as a subset of what is termed the woke right, the J pill. It's a mirror of woke left. But the red pills have always just been euphemisms that were going to point you back to the same scapegoat anyway, the same premise, the same recycled stuff. So a lot of people are still chasing a whodunit, or they still think that they're the vanguard of the resistance, that they're fighting the info war. Like if you're fighting the info war, you're part of the problem. You should be a conscientious objector. But yes, most of them are far behind. And I'm not trying to build bridges. I'm not trying to wake people up. I'm like, let's go wake them up. It's like, no. What we need to do is take note of these intransigent death clingers, guardrail clingers, fence squatters, because we want the division between Trutherville alternative media and the off-world stage perspective to be very pronounced. We're creating this third branch of media we already have. That's what this think tank is. But as we metastasize it, we want to maintain market distinction. We want this to be the alternative to the controlled opposition alternative. And we have to be very adamant about the distinctions so that we can effectively call out the controlled opposition propaganda mules, dupes, and agents for what they are. And if that's not what they are, they have every opportunity to get off that guardrail. If you're still stuck behind, they kill people in psyops, and I'm scared of chemtrails, you're going to stand out to us as this moves forward. And if you want to cling to that as though it's some kind of foundational tenet of your faith, go for it. It's important to be able to recognize when you're wrong, but also when you're right, because we are correct about these things, but we're marginalized, we're a minority, we're not even acknowledged. And a lot of people will say, well, a lot of people aren't comfortable going against the grain. Like that meme where it has some guy looking at a mob and he's like, you're all wrong. Well, that's kind of us right now in a way, in terms of numbers, but we can't be intimidated by that. And this thing with Charlie Kirk and the subsequent conjecture over the cause of death and a lot of people arriving at the squib conclusion is very heartening, because it shows that there's a lot more of us than I thought. They just haven't been consolidated. They're still following Candace Owens. They're still eating those breadcrumbs. They're still occasionally taking red pills. And so what happens is they fall into the default pattern of thinking, if the truth comes out, it's going to come over here. It's like, no, the rabbit trails will never lead you off world stage. So Mick Dirty Work says 55 in the chat and 9 thumbs up. Oh, by the way, we're on DLive. We're on Twitter and YouTube. We've only been live for 27 minutes. The numbers will pick up. I see it's gone up to 61. I just downloaded OBS. I have a desktop computer that seems to be perfectly available for me to run at 24/7. It won't be super elaborate because the internet connection is not all that great. But what I will do is run 24/7 of the last 12 hours of audio feeds, which will be containing a lot of phone calls. We'll take calls tonight if you want to call in, the numbers on the screen. And these will be played in the background with open chat and a Discord link. And so that's kind of what we're doing here, is we want to bring in people who have our perspective. And point of view is everything. If your point of view mirrors that of Wikipedia or ChatGPT, you're going to sink. You see, this is the sea of irrelevance. And red pills will sink you down to the bottom. Taking sides on any of these issues, if you're anti on any issue, you're still encumbered by the world stage model and all of its presuppositions and the lies that it's built upon. Plain Dakota says, Tim, I think in the future when you get your studio back up, you should watch Candace Owens clips and criticize and react to them. That's what people like. Oh, okay. That's not a bad idea. I should start doing that now. I'll put that on my whiteboard here. Constant Elevation says, I drove by a giant Charlie Kirk shrine today in rural Nebraska. Eddie F says, now what? We figured out our reality is scripted. Well, the thing is, okay, a lot of people know there's fake events, but it's an oversimplification to say, I know reality is scripted. Like, that's an easy thing to say, but can you back it up? Can you prove it? Are you ready to, can you actually make the case? Like, by pointing out facts and the infrastructure of fakery? Or does it just come off as an opinion, like a crazy uncle over Thanksgiving dinner opinion? Like everything's a script. Like that's a position that I'd refer to as low information disbelief, where you just don't believe the mainstream. But can you substantiate it? Eddie F says, are we just going to continue dissecting the news? Why continue if we know it's scripted? Well, you don't have to. I mean, this is like, to me, this is just philosophic discussion. It's kind of ivory tower. I'm not politically engaged. But can you claim that you know it? Because I mean, when I'm saying when you know it, can you describe it to me? Like, how do you know it's scripted, and to what extent? Because even the people who understand scripted events are having a hard time when I'm suggesting that the Charlie Kirk thing was planned 30 years in advance. That's still stretching people's ability to even entertain a hypothetical. As a hypothetical, it's hard for them to comprehend that it was scheduled 30 years in advance. And a lot of people haven't let go of the notion that he necessarily would have died. They're still chasing that particular red herring. But if you can't prove it, then you can't claim that you know it. You can only say that you believe it. And this isn't a place for believers or disbelievers, mere disbelievers. It has to be like some information to back it up. Like, why don't you believe it? What is your basis for claiming that these events are scripted in advance? And again, if you can't demonstrate it, it doesn't matter. It's not an echo chamber. We're presenting a model that's open for criticism and it's falsifiable. You can debunk it if you can. Not only that, maybe you haven't thought it through 15 or 20 steps ahead, but you kind of should. Because if fake, then what? Turn off the TV? No. If fake, you should be able to, in a way, you should be able to unravel the entire world stage model just based on that one fact. Like, so if Charlie Kirk's neck was squibbed, well, then you can list the people who were involved. Then you can rule in who would necessarily be involved within law enforcement, within government. I mean, obviously Trump, J.D. Vance, Erica Kirk, TPUSA. So you start looking at who would have to know and at one level. And what you unravel here is that this entire thing is not what people think. But you have to provide a roadmap. Calling stuff fake is not good enough. Anybody can say, oh, that's fake. People have been doing it for years. Eddie F says, why do we need to prove it to people? We don't. I'm not trying to wake anybody up. This is for our own information. And also, I don't know everything. If you do, then good for you. You know, go fishing or something. I'm still trying to figure this out. You know, we're the ones who 2 years ago figured out concurrent programming, coined the phrase. We're the ones who really developed this thinking along the lines of news benders and recognizing how history bending works. And from this, we've recognized the ongoing concurrence between mainstream promoted entertainment, Hollywood type stuff with the fake events and the purpose thereof. So we're not just saying it's fake, stating the obvious. That's not what we're doing here. But if you have questions about why you're doing this, you're probably in the wrong place. If you're not guided by curiosity, if you're not intrigued by what we're finding, you realize this is the first time that anybody has ever come across a real conspiracy that wasn't planted by intel to mislead you, that this is the only real provable conspiracy. And it's ongoing and it's successful. And it reveals that the government is global in scale. Whatever you think of that word. It's monolithic. It is a de facto one world religion. And everybody you know is under a mass delusion. And you're like, what do we do with this? Why are you doing this? Why do you care? It's like, I'm sorry, but I haven't been rendered apathetic. People say, oh, it's fake. Don't give it your loosh. It's like, no, it can have all of it, because when I see something like that, I want to understand it. So whatever, I mean, to each their own. If you don't see the value in understanding your world and worldview and why it matters, that's on you. But another point to consider here is that your worldview was conditioned into you. Like the parameters that you have internalized were designed and conditioned into you to make you programmable by the model itself. So the world stage model is like the Truman Show. Well, Truman was indoctrinated to be a fool. He wasn't taught about boundaries, about fake boundaries, about the fake city he was in, about lying people around him. He wasn't informed. He was conformed. And so knowing it's fake is only part of it. You have to understand the model and then separate from it and then recognize, well, what did they do to your mind to make you accept it? And you have to undo that damage. What logical fallacies get a pass? What are the vulnerabilities in your mental immune system? Have you really cured yourself of mind aids? Let's Go says, Eddie, this channel is a refuge in a sea of nonsense, and the mass believers help me stay calm when everything points to chaos. Well, this is the only think tank with this very specific point of view. And point of view is everything. If your point of view is all these coincidences that you guys are calling out are not possibly there by intention, they're absolutely just random. If that's your opinion is derived from your perspective. And your perspective would be the one that does not include mass media manipulation at the scale that we commonly describe here. And that means that you're not informed about it, or you don't care about it, you don't include it in your worldview, which means your perspective is just like that of ChatGPT or Wiki. We have different points of view, so we see it differently. And I can accept that. I'm not trying to tell people what to believe, especially if their point of view would preclude that. You can talk to somebody in Normieville about any of these things, and they'll nod their head, they'll agree, they'll think, yeah, it's probably true. But then it'll evaporate from their mind, like the Men in Black have just brought in the mind erasers, because they cannot compute it. It's sort of like how you just automatically dismiss the ramblings of a crazy person, like legitimately crazy. Yeah, you kind of dismiss it because you know that what they're saying is likely pure confabulation. But what we're saying here is dismissed in the same way. I had someone in some chat, they were saying, or somebody had said, you guys are, you touch grass, are you crazy? And I'm like, are you telling me that the 100 people listening are all crazy? Like somehow I've created a podcast that diagnoses crazy people and puts them all on a list. We're not arriving at our conclusions by anything other than examining what's been presented and making observations. And when I say this is a testable model, I can cite many examples. Sometimes it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. I'm like, I'm going to go watch this movie and see what's going to happen on the world stage next week. So I go watch a movie and I see the trailer for Sinners. And I'm like, looks like we're going to have a bunch of race war psyops. And what do we have? Austin Metcalf, Shiloh Hendricks, Rodney Hinton Jr. Then you had the subway killing, which incited the same stuff. You had Raja Jackson and Psycho Stu beating him in the ring. So you see all these things piling up very quickly following the movie that sets the stage. Reoccurring theme. We had Mountainhead starring this Elon Musk-esque character whose generative AI plunges the world into chaos. And next thing you know, LA's on fire. Then you got the 1,500 No Kings protests. Andrea says, I was shocked at how many people suggested you were schizophrenic in the comments on your X post. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. 500,000 views. It brought in a lot of people. And they see me making these connections as schizophrenic. And I'm like, well, but you admit these are fascinating coincidences. And that's why people are looking at it. If I was just pointing out random stuff, it wouldn't have received 500,000 hits. Because what I'm pointing out are legitimate connections. Like Cheney dies, plane hits a building, 9 dead, 11 injured. Like if you don't see that connection, then you're in denial. It is a connection. We can debate as to whether or not there's intentionality behind it. Another thing that we need to point out here is that we didn't just start noticing psyops yesterday. So there's this thing I've noticed, maybe I should call it Westworld syndrome instead of Plato's cave syndrome. We got a couple syndromes here. Like they're calling me crazy, but I'm diagnosing them with these various conditions. So Westworld syndrome refers to how when the synths who are in the simulation are shown something that doesn't exist in their world. So you're in an old Western and they see an iPhone. They wouldn't be able to process it. They would say, that doesn't look like anything to me. And What keeps them locked in this simulation is that they relive the same day again and again and again. There's no continuity day to day. And that's where I see a lot of these people who cannot make sense of these connections between movies and between similar events, between drills and events, and the pattern that we're seeing. When I say predictability, I'm like, if it's fake, you're going to see drills, you're going to see concurrent programming, and then we do. I shouldn't be able to predict that. We shouldn't have been able to have predicted that there were drills right before this plane crash. So when somebody is saying these coincidences don't mean anything, it's because in their frame of reference, there's no continuity day to day. Yesterday's news, or today's Netflix has nothing to do with this. There's no continuity. And because of this, they can't see it. For me, there's continuity. The same production company that faked Trump's ear wound, faked Butler's ear wound, faked 9/11, faked 2020, fakes terror attacks, and whatever, the PSYOP entertainment complex. It's a term I use. The PSYOP entertainment complex. Forget military industrial complex. The PSYOP entertainment complex has been producing content for the masses for a long time. That's what's behind the bread and circuses. So the bread and circuses didn't just start last week. So when I point out something and I'm describing these coincidences as intentional, well, I'm doing so with a bit of a understanding about how routine this actually is. Like, look at 9/11. Was not 9/11 super encoded with numerology, with symbols, with archetypes? I mean, is this not the case with nearly every movie, every PSYOP? Like, there's this reoccurring pattern. And so for this plane crash to have the Cheney connected to it and to have all sorts of 9/11 stuff, it's like, why wouldn't you expect it? 9/11 was one of the most predicted and concurrently mirrored events of all time. Like, while it was happening, it was in the movies in various forms. Leading up to it for decades, it was in the movies, it was in the books, it was in pretty much everything. So when somebody says it doesn't look like anything to me, it's like, okay, I understand. Because from your perspective, there's no mechanism by which all these things could be connected. Because to you, media, entertainment, and politics are all separate. These are all compartments. And governments are real. And the news agencies are just out there with cameras recording events and then telling us about it. They don't recognize that the media is actually producing, like a reality TV show, these events. Armin Ross says they treat Netflix as organically occurring fiction, so they don't link it to the news. And if they do, they can't imagine humans writing it, so they jump into the simulation. Yeah, I see that a lot. And again, appeal to simulation is just intellectual laziness at this point. But he makes a really good point here. They think that Netflix is organic. I mean, I'm not the only one who's noticed that Netflix's co-founder, original CEO, is the nephew of Edward Bernays. Propaganda. This guy wrote about influencing the masses in mass, like an instruction manual for it. Like it was nothing. Like he talked about the invisible government that we'll never see, and also related to Sigmund Freud. So they know how to tap into your subconscious. They know what drives you. They know how to manipulate us as a mass organism. And you see Netflix, though. Netflix has been, it's not just us either. Netflix has been widely acknowledged every single time it mirrors an event. So one night we're talking about the crown jewels being stolen, me and fakeologists. I'm like, it's probably fake. I don't know. I need more information. I have to look for the hallmarks of hoaxery. Well, within 24 hours, we find out, oh, it happens during the No Kings protest. Then we find out, oh, by the way, according to Inside Edition and basically every news agency, Netflix did it again. The show Lupin had a jewelry thief breaking into the Louvre and stealing the necklace of Marie Antoinette, significantly because, well, I would say it's significant because the fact her head was cut off. Another No Kings protest. Then you've got Leave the World Behind, widely acknowledged for predicting a lot of the stuff we saw with Boeing, with Tesla, and other things. Widely acknowledged by the media as predicting stuff, as they tell us there's no such thing as predictive programming. But that was produced by the Obamas, which to me just tells me that they got into the predictive programming business, concurrent programming business. So what does this really mean? Well, because for those who say it couldn't be done by humans, it actually could be. Because what we're talking about is the script for the fake event. Like, okay, we're going to put this into the history books, and it's going to be played out in this many years. We'll just say 10 years. So now this script is classified, top secret. Nobody gets to see it except for the top directors and the intermediaries who are going to feed this content to their platformed artists and podcasters. So we need you to talk about this and add these specific elements. And we have a great example with Snake Eyes, because with Snake Eyes, you have certain elements that are repeated in every one of the other examples of content that foreshadowed the real event or happened at the same time. Like, I'm still getting retweets on my Substack post about The Tempest, how in the show The Tempest, the widow takes over the young Republicans, fake cries on stage, and gets called out for possibly being behind her husband's death and simulating grief, faking her grief. I'm like, that's exactly what happened to Erica Kirk. Like, that show has been tracking. It foreshadowed. I mean, I talked about what was going to happen with Erica Kirk before it happened based on the widow character in The Tempest. Now, I did this knowing this is just the model. This is how it works. Now, we're not saying we watch Netflix and predict the future. No, what we're watching isn't Netflix. We're watching the people who watch Netflix. We're watching the demographics who are targeted with the messaging that will correspond to the psyops that will be targeting them as well. I'm not watching the news, watching Netflix to read the future. I'm watching to see what propaganda messaging is being blasted, what the people are being prepared to believe, what they're being made suggestible for. Leo the Squib says, people assume you're crazy because they don't know or acknowledge pre-programming. If they did, they'd be less incredulous. I don't even approach it, because we're looking at a religious paradigm. Mainstream media is a fictional universe. So religions have their fake stories, their pseudo histories. Well, what do you think our history is? It's not objective. It's a construct. It's not just retconned and retroactively altered and tampered with, but it is deliberately and proactively created by a media monopoly. Our history is a collectively agreed upon delusion, and it's being performed for us, and we're internalizing it, and it's creating this consensus worldview. It's just like a religion. So if they're saying we're crazy, it's like, you have to remember, from that perspective, we are, or we're incomprehensible, or saying isn't even possible. But from our perspective, what they believe is bullshit. What they believe is provable bullshit. They won't even look into what we're saying. But what do you expect? It's a religion. And the only people I'm even interested in engaging with are those who've already figured it out and have made their way out of Normieville, have walked through Trutherville, are now dejected. And when they see the guardrails falling, they're going to jump to the off-world stage perspective. Those are the only ones that we actually want to reach. We have to keep this in group. It's not outreach. We're not trying to wake people up. We're trying to consolidate and, if anything, exacerbate the chasm, the schism, make the distinction clearer, burn the bridges. I have no interest in being condescended to by somebody who can look at all these coincidences and say, that doesn't look like anything to me. It's like, that doesn't sound like thinking to me. That sounds like pure incredulity. Leo the Squib says, should we be doing a better job of platforming the pre-programming to our neighbors? No, we keep it in group. We fine tune our methodology. We maintain this empirical research, and we build content. So we need an auto hoax wiki. Any kind of content that we build has to stem from this point of view, because our point of view is fundamentally different from the mainstream point of view and the alternative point of view. I had a conversation with some people last night who were convinced that Donald Trump had Charlie Kirk assassinated. You think I'm going to say he's not dead? No. No, I'm not going to alienate them. I'm not going to confuse them. See, if I was legitimately crazy, let's say I was schizophrenic, right? Well, one of the things that typifies that particular state is a lack of insight. Like, they don't know how crazy they sound. That's why they come off as crazy. They can't modulate it. So someone who's legitimately ill in that way, neurodivergent, will go into a room and say something that's insane to them because they're not recognizing the different perspectives, and that what they're experiencing is not what everyone else is experiencing. The fact that I can know the difference and blend in with normies, blend in with wokies, blend in with truthers, shows that I'm cognizant of how people see things and how I come off. I have insight. So no, I'm not crazy. But that's also ad hominem, to say the reason why you guys read too much into coincidences is because you haven't touched the grass. See, ad hominem isn't just name calling, because you can call people names and debunk their arguments separately. They call us names, but they don't debunk our arguments. They use their slander as an argument. Oh, because they're crazy, their arguments are invalid. Well, I'm sorry, that's a fallacious argument. Armin Ross says, what do you think will be the result if enough people realize what we do? What do you see happening? Adamski says, we as a few hundred people. Not really. We went from 300 to 12,000 subs before they cut me off last time, and those numbers haven't gone down. And if you saw my stats on Spotify at one point, there have been attempts to stimmy this, but I've looked at some numbers here and there, and I have an idea of the numbers. So the objective here, though, is to get our numbers up to, I think, 5 to 10,000 is enough for this demographic to become not only self-aware as such, but we all have to use the same jargon. I know that sounds culty, but that's important. The jargon is what puts us all in the same framework. So we're all saying off-world stage perspective, because you can't fake that. If your default opinion echoes ChatGPT, echoes whatever the Kool-Aid drinkers in Alex Jonestown are saying, you're not off-world stage. If you're still triggered by the news, or you can't tell real from fake, or you're ambiguous, or you're squatting on a guardrail, or you admit that you're confused and you don't know real from fake, yeah, you're on the world stage. You're in the land of confusion. They got you. You're a mind war casualty. Off-world stage isn't something that can be faked, and we need enough people here. And then what will happen is we'll see the acceleration of content creation. Content creators in this third branch will be platformed. There'll be, there aren't enough content creators with this perspective, but there are many who are adjacent. But we don't want adjacent. We don't want somebody who's 95% on board with off-world stage, but they're also fighting the system when it comes to chemtrails or whatever issue. If they're anti anything, they're corrupted. And you can be a non-participant, but if you take the anti-position, you're controlled opposition. And if that sounds harsh, well, really ask yourself, what's more important? Fighting a controlled opposition fight with legions of brainwashees, taking breadcrumbs from intel agencies who think you're dumb, or unmasking the only conspiracy that's demonstrably true and ongoing? Adamski says it does sound culty. No, it actually doesn't. It's a culture. We're fomenting a culture of disbelief. But it sounds culty because it's small. But you have to remember, mainstream is a cult. You're taking your beliefs secondhand through a secular priesthood. You're taking a worldview that has been provably corrupted, bent, distorted. You're in a closed informational system. Definitionally, it's a fictional universe. You're following your new Bible, the New Testament. Like, you're in the cult. If you're a mainstreamer or alternative, you've got programmed fears, triggers, God constructs that do not actually exist, hyperstitions. You exist in hyper reality. We're the only objectivists out here. This is an anti-cult. But you can take the structure of a cult and understand the purpose of it. We have to have points of agreement. We don't want to open the doors to people who fundamentally disagree or who are advocating for mainstream media. Like I used to get this common refrain from people. They would say, well, I just want to be a devil's advocate. What if this is all just coincidence? It's like, I'm sorry, but we're the devil. Like, we're the devil's advocates here. You are the mainstream advocate, because the mainstream position is that everything is a coincidence, that there are no meaningful coincidences, that there is no world stage. That's the default. So you can't claim to be a devil's advocate if you're on the default and then challenging us. Lesko says, the best part of the raft is that we're non-activists. This is a philosophical endeavor, no cortisol-raising activism necessary. Yeah, one of the points here too is that when something happens, something big, we're not responding like, oh, the victims, our hearts go out to the victims. Let's go fund some money to these crying people. And no, I didn't send money to Erica Kirk. We pause. We're not responding to it in that sense. We're waiting because we don't want to overreact, because we don't have enough information to know it's true on day one. So being a skeptic means you don't have to be reactive. And if you have the ups and downs from overreacting, the highs and the lows, that's addictive in and of itself. No one who can be triggered emotionally to think horrible thoughts by the black screen on the TV about innocent people can claim to be sane compared to us. I mean, I know a lot of people who are like pretty much pro political violence. I mean, I'm talking people who are just regular church going, nice people, family people. But when you hear their political opinions, yeah, they're all about the political violence. They're all about, oh, Butler, he missed. Like, I know people like that. I'm talking religious people, good people, better than me, like good, virtuous people, but they harbor evil thoughts because of the black box told them. Like, oh, on South Park, they made fun of this guy. I got to hate him. And then he dies, and now they're celebrating it. Like, I'm sorry, you'll never catch me celebrating the death of anybody like that. I'm pretty sure I'm not a psychopath, but I'm pretty sure that if you're heavily engaged in media, you're selectively psychopathic about something. Look at how the people in 2020 reacted. What do you call that? I mean, they had to shut down 911 in some areas because so many people are snitching on their neighbors who are coughing, hoping their neighbors would be, picked up and put into quarantine. Like, we do live in a very, very interesting times, and people have MK Ultra. And I used to get lambasted by certain red pill types, the kind of the shrill red pill wokes, and they'd be like, oh, you guys just think it's about movies and fakery, but it's gonna go kinetic. And the troops are gonna come and put their boots on your face, and you're telling everybody not to fight and resist. I would get accused of, I guess, being a little too passive about this, that I'm not up in arms, that I'm not running to go climb the walls of the Capitol or go after the FBI. Like, I had people who would actually go there. Like, you're too calm about this. And in my research into the origins of skepticism in particular, Piro, we're talking about the concept of skepticism primarily based on suspending judgment so you don't overreact to something that may not even exist. And this led to a peace of mind that they called ataraxia, a quiescence, that this peace of mind was the result of not giving too many F's about things that are actually fake. And so you look immoral, lazy, you look like you don't care, maybe, because you're not overreacting all the time. But what if what they're reacting to is all fake? Like, what position is saner? Like, why stress yourself out? And this peace of mind approach that arrived from skepticism, that's what kind of evolved into Epicureanism, hedonism. Adamski, phones have not been open for a long time, and I don't know the races of my callers. But we get callers, or we used to get callers based on the topics and how I would, keyword the topic to get those callers in. We used to get a lot of Q people, a lot of them. So many Q people, trust the plan, 4D chess, 5G chess, children being saved. We had JFK believers, people who believe that JFK was coming back from the dead to save us. All right, continuing here. So we were talking about Plato's cave dwellers, which are the people who reject those who come back into the cave and tell them what they saw. Like, no, their world is only what's in the cave. So if you're a Plato's cave dweller, we're referring to your point of view is not inclusive of anything that has not been projected on the wall for you. Westworld syndrome refers to the inability to process anything that didn't arrive through the black monolith, through your worldview provider, and therefore you don't process it. You can just dismiss it. The worldview is a consensus agreement. And what we're doing is we're breaking with consensus. But what we have brought here to the conversation, what's new about the IPS versus other channels, is that we recognize that alt media is actually part of that consensus. It's a duopoly. Yeah, JFK must have died at some point. He'd be 100 and something. He certainly didn't die on 11/22/63. I don't know if I'm with Dallas Goldbug. I don't know if he became Jimmy Carter with some cosmetics. Infinite Plane Radio. Yeah, go ahead and mute your speaker, but yeah.
I'm trying to figure out this thing. I just downloaded this app so I can make a call. I'll go on the big speaker.
Sure.
Good audio or not? Sure.
Your audio is a little buzzy and I don't know, mumbly, but go on.
All right. Anyways, hey, look, this is Dookie. I put it in Discord just now, and I'm gonna just ask this real quick, and I'll get off so you can answer it. I put one thing I might add: ideas are infectious. Even when you dismiss the nutter at the bus stop, what he says to you will stay in your mind. It doesn't get deleted. The instant dismissal from incredulity doesn't mean the idea goes away. And if the idea remains presented, there's no escape but to challenge it. And when one challenges, let's say, your new book, they won't be able to find the evidence needed to discredit the thing. And to me, that opens a door. And I'm interested, do you think the same way? Do you think that actually opens a door? Or...
I see what you're saying, because you're suggesting, can you plant seeds, for example? Like they may not agree with it now, but maybe later.
Yeah, can you? But hey, this app sucks. So I'm glad you were able to understand me, but not acting up again. I'm gonna go.
Okay, actually, now it sounds clear.
Does it? Because to me, it doesn't on my end.
No, it just clarified.
Okay.
But anyway, thanks for the call, and I'll go ahead and comment on that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so when I say people have Westworld syndrome, I make it sound like they're hopeless. Like you might as well not talk to normies about this stuff because it's not going to penetrate. It's just going to bounce off their eyeballs because you're not a black screen. You're not the monolith. You're not a appointed pundit. But it's possible for some. However, I think it's a waste of time and resources because we're vastly outnumbered. And there are already people who are like 90% there. So let's work on them. And then we could work on we got to get the early adopters because there's a fundamental distinction between the early adopters and the ones you have to drag kicking and screaming. The difference is the early adopters are curious, they're seeking, and they're active. We're not trying to drag people from a slumber. We want to get the people who are already seeking. It's kind of like also how, let's say you're recruiting people like CIA or something, and you want to recruit somebody for a specific role or something. You can't just take any random agent and then plug them into something. It's easier to find somebody who's already embedded in the field, who've already worked their way up somewhere. It saves you a lot of work because they did all the work. They're already useful. And we don't want people who need to be dragged to something and forced to look like in John Carpenter's They Live, where he has to beat the guy with his fists and they have to fight for half an hour before he gets the guy to put his sunglasses on and see the world as it is. Like, we don't want to fight people to see things from our perspective. We want to get the people who are fighting to get more clarity, who are putting effort into it. And the people who have been challenging the CK event are doing so against the grain. There's nobody out there who's mirroring that. There are no platforms, there's no outlets that are even platforming these ideas. Dr. Bass Ackworth says, anyone else see the channel with guys claiming to be the real JFK? It's weird. He's got a growing audience. No, I have not, but there's a couple of channels I followed. There's this guy who was claiming to be Elvis, and his friend was claiming to be Bruce Lee. And they both claimed to be connected to JFK Jr. and JFK and Donald Trump. And they got away with it. I mean, they I don't know why it is, but for some reason, a lot of people are just very susceptible. Like it's the will to believe. It's like with aliens. When it comes to aliens, you know, the reason why people believe in it is because they have a strong desire to believe. Again, I point out here that our perspective is that of non-believers, because this is not media is not a religion. You don't believe in science. You know what's true based on the evidence, and you know why you don't believe what isn't true based on the information that contradicts the premise. Same thing with news. Yeah, Dr. Ackworth says everyone accepts that Charlie Kirk is dead. That's their starting point. So they've taken a what is it into a whodunit. That's why Candace Owens is the #1 podcaster. She's not the #1 podcaster because she's the best researcher or she has the best intel. She's the #1 podcaster because she's platformed to be the loudest voice contradicting the mainstream. Armin says, ironic how the world stage doesn't hurt anyone because they can convince people to hurt themselves and their neighbors. Those who are most worried about them are the ones spreading the most hurt. Yes. That's why I suggest the only position that's worth taking is conscientious objector. Because even if you really feel strongly about any of the issues presented, do you really want to align yourself with people who are significantly plugged into this thing? Like, every position is part of a cluster. You can't just take a belief out of context and just make that your sole issue, because these are part of clusters. And I can demonstrate this, but none of these things are neutral, and they always put you in boxes. There's a reason why every conspiracy theory gets you branded by the mainstream as anti-Semite. Like, most conspiracy theorists aren't. They would never make that association, but that's because they don't know that they're in a subset of that worldview, but they've been given euphemistically described conspiracy villains like bankers or reptilians or the deep state. But these are always just ways of leading you to this predetermined conclusion. Ted Stryker has brought in a box, looks like 20 titanium blue wrenches. And again, these are about 18-inch. I keep them by the front door. You know, they're self-defense. Keep one in your vehicle. Just make sure nobody steals it off your porch. You'll probably get it by Instacart. It's pretty quick. Armin Ross says Charlie Kirk is dead. The actor playing Charlie Kirk is not. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's one of the main points here. And this is where I think ego is a guardrail, because there are people who just don't want to admit that they got tricked, that they cried. And that's why Erica Kirk's gig was so important, because when somebody cries after an event, it's like the tears are like glue. Like the belief is now glued to their memory, their brain, their whole existence. The tear bond, the emotions bond them to the belief. So I wept for days over Charlie Kirk. I painted a mural. Well, good luck convincing that person that Charlie Kirk was a lying wolf in sheep's clothing, a deceiver, and a crisis actor who didn't believe anything that he said. Good luck making that case. Vanden, say what? Lasers go pew pew. Watching Mama. I see Gematria 49. Max Carter, Haystack Sniper. Dominic Spiato. K Swan. Brandon Q. Just give me 5 minutes. Have all received the blue wrench. RJ, Michelle K. Mimsy Schwimsy. Splatter, Friendly Ghost. Emmy Lou Adamski, Space Chimps, They Lie We See. You've all received the coveted blue wrenches. What those are, these are symbols that represent what allowed this think tank to even exist, which was a phalanx of wrench holding mods. Like, on YouTube, you have moderators who can ban the trolls. And we gave every person a moderator status. There used to be a lot more trolls. Honestly, it used to be crazy. It used to be the point where you could hardly even maintain a conversation without floods of trolls coming in. So once we set up the wall of wrenches, it wasn't an issue. Dr. Bass Ackworth says the actors who played Charlie and Erica were probably not even a couple. Yeah, there were a number of videos that have popped up. Like Erica didn't know the kids' names or the birth dates, or it was just like or the anniversary dates. It just seemed like she didn't know. You never see the children's faces, which I get it. They're being stalked, but then why put their kids out there at all? I don't even think they were real. It's a soap opera. It's a soap opera. Dick Lens Flare transitions. Nixon says, have you seen the 2 minutes just before they announced Charlie Kirk on Joe Rogan and Charlie Sheen on 910? They foreshadowed the event with metaphors. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you brought that up. So on 910, when Charlie's on his America comeback tour, Charlie Sheen is on his comeback tour. He releases Charlie on 910 on Netflix. He goes on the top podcast. Again, it does not count as predictive programming if it's not platformed mainstream. Like if you wrote a blog and it had some coincidental connection to a future event, you cannot consider that evidence of media foreshadowing because you're not media. But Joe Rogan is. So Joe Rogan is talking to Charlie Sheen, and Charlie Sheen is describing how he was at an event and he got sniped. How somebody hit him with a projectile right on the side of his face, right on his eye. And Joe Rogan's like, that was a great shot. So they're talking about this. Then they talk about JFK. They talk about Lee Harvey Oswald. They talked about how conspiracy theorists became a thing after JFK, and the term conspiracy theory was planted by the intel to make people who question the news look crazy. So they're talking about JFK throughout the duration of this podcast and describing getting sniped. Joe Rogan's wearing a shirt with a little arrowhead on it. And as they're going through these various, again, like foreshadowings of the event, then they interrupt and like, oh, Charlie Kirk just got shot. We found a ton of JFK references that were happening that day. Roger Stone was like, Charlie Kirk just called me and he said he wanted to talk about JFK on my show. Like, really? Then you've got the comparisons between Erica Kirk wanting to see Charlie's body and Jackie Kennedy showing up at the swearing in of LBJ in a bloody dress because she wanted people to see what was done. They do these comparisons. Adamski says Rogan regularly interviews, or not? Yeah, the people he interviews are there to deliver propaganda messaging. So people will say, well, is that a coincidence? Well, no. The JFK stuff is just part of it. There's a ton of stuff that was going on that day. The forced memeing of Charlie out there. And then you have the baseball player, Alejandro Kirk, described as a pain in the neck. He has numerous headlines. He gets hit with the ball, taken off the field. He's the guy whose bat broke the last play. Remember, the bat broke like the neck. And in the article where he's a pain in the neck, they're dumping Gatorade on him and it looks like blood coming out of his neck. We have so many examples. But what connects them are the common denominators. So the PSYOP script for the Charlie event had certain memes that were going to go out in every one of these instances. The name Charlie, the name Kirk, Storm, a hole on that specific part of the neck, an executioner named Tyler, and the date, September 10th. So those 6 elements, between 4 and 6 of them, occur in every instance of predictive and concurrent programming for this event. Like Charlie Kirk is on episode 33 of Human Events, and he's talking to a guy named Tyler. And Tyler's like, in response to Kirk talking about public executions that should be televised, he's like, well, you know, in France, the last public execution was on 9/10, 1977. So Tyler, 9/10. And he's talking about it being a guillotine. So the neck is inferred. So you got Charlie, Kirk, Tyler, execution, 9/10, neck. See, these elements are all reflected there. Then you go back to Emerson Drive. She's my kind of crazy. Erica Kirk's in a video where she zip lines past 9/10 above Fremont. Just zip lines right past it. So like, whoa, wait, you got Erica Kirk, 9/10. And on 9/10, 2012, in that YouTube video's comments section, she thanks the director. She says, hey, Tyler, that was a great shoot today. I had a blast. It's like, wait, Tyler, shoot, blast, Erica Kirk, 9/10. Of course, these all stem from Snake Eyes, which takes place against the storm. Executioner, Tyler the executioner, Charlie Kirkland gets shot in the neck. And these are all interconnected. The actress next to Charlie Kirkland, shot in the neck, shows up in Heads of State as VP Kirk. And since then, we've noted, how many times has Erica Kirk been associated with the VP, been suggested as a potential VP for J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance and her hanging out, leather pants. I mean, this has been a consistent theme. So you have a character, Elizabeth Kirk, who's a vice president, who plays in the Snake Eyes movie associated with Charlie Kirk. And this Erica or Elizabeth Kirk VP gets shot in the neck. Again, it's a 2025. I mean, we have tons of examples of this, but my point here is that you have all these examples of this type of content, whether it's in the baseball game, or it's happening in the movies, or it's happening in the podcasts, you know, Joe Rogan or Human Events. So you see these messages showing up in these different contexts. And now how is this possible? Well, that top secret classified PSYOP script is disseminated to these various propaganda conduits. It's actually not that complicated. If you were a propagandist and you had carte blanche, you're just like, any production studio, any artist, any musician you go to will take our money, our black budget money, and they will put these props, they'll put these elements into their content. That's not hard to do. And nobody would have to know. It'd be super compartmentalized. And this would explain the sheer volume of this type of stuff leading up to major events. Not to mention the drills. I mean, we can't forget that we're also talking about drills that are concurrent with these events, which also convey the fact that these things are scheduled in advance. Armin Ross says someone with a good AI should do a clip of the seance where Candace Owens is talking with Charlie Kirk's spirit from beyond. Yeah, that ought to be an animated episode of South Pole. That actually sounds good. So this is another reason why Candace can never say he was squibbed, because she talked to his ghost. So how did Candace Owens talk to his ghost if he's not dead? Jamarian May says, Tim, you must watch the new television series called Pluribus, the same writer and creator as Breaking Bad, centered around a hive mind takeover of the world. Adamski says, where's the recent image of Dylan Roof with his bangs being kept tidy? I think Dylan Roof came back as the parlor shooter. Do you remember the parlor shooter? Was that in Atlanta? And I don't think it was a coincidence. This is back in 2020, leading up to 2021. You had this xenophobe, racist archetype shooter who was going to massage parlors and killing immigrant massage. Oh, let me turn my internet connection back on. Massage therapists. So they called him the parlor shooter. And many people noticed that he looked like an appropriately aged Dylan Roof. Oh, yeah, that was Robert Long. 8 deaths, 1 injured. Anti-Asian racism. It was the 2021 spa shooters, but they called him a parlor shooter. And at the time, I was like, this is interesting, because they were trying to say that Parler, the app, the Twitter competitor that the right wing was using to organize J6, was a threat to public safety. It was going to foment terrorism. So there's this anti-Parler sentiment. And then Jeff Bezos, they pulled the servers. They just tanked it. In fact, Candace Owens' husband was the CEO of Parler. But at the time that Parler was under attack by the media, you had the racist Parler shooter in the news. And I was like, that can't be a coincidence. But yeah, if you look at Robert Long, it looks like Dylan Roof with a slightly fashy haircut. So he combed his bangs over. I don't know if it's the same guy. They look the same. But honestly, a lot of these shooters look the same to me. Okay, phones are back open. I realized my internet connection had gone down on that device. I'm looking at the photography from it. Gold Spa. Aromatherapy Spa. Yeah, I see the Dylan Roof in him, but it doesn't add or subtract to our general picture here. And in the future, it won't even matter if they're recycling crisis actors. Like, that's not one of our strong points. We don't need to make it necessarily, because they're going to replace them all with AI. We're going to continue with our history bending deconstructions. I want to talk about the Red Witch archetype and the mass shooting archetypes and how they transitioned from bowl cut neo-Nazi white kids with guns to these Reddit radicalized leftist ideologues who write their manifestos on bullets. I mean, Luigi did it. And then you got Tyler Robinson. But there are some fascinating connections between the Tyler Robinson character, how he's been characterized, the motivations for his shooting, and the Annunciation shooter, which connects to the movie Weapons, which all connects to the ironic way that Kirk was shot after the question about weapons. And by the way, his final question that Charlie was asked by a guy who was on video rehearsing his response to the shooting in advance. I don't know if you saw that. Donna Southard says, AI sports could easily be played. Yeah, imagine that. Like an entire league. You could just fabricate a league. You know, I had made this point a few years ago, and we could do it. But I was like, let's start our own space agency. Like, who's going to call it fake? Because the people who automatically shut off critical thinking when they see a rocket will think it's real. And if they call it fake, we'll just call them flat earth Nazis. What are you, a flat earther? Of course it's real. And then once we get our rockets into space, we'll have all kinds of CubeSats. I even thought about this cost-wise. I think a CubeSat's like $40K. So we just got to get a group of people who all want a CubeSat in orbit and then go on the app. Like, yeah, if you want to know where your CubeSat is, just look at the app. Just like they do with the ISS. Just look at the app. Leo says, so many Tylers. Never met a Tyler in real life, but there was at least 3 in the story. Okay, you got Tyler Robinson, the shooter. You got the Tyler character with Charlie Kirk talking about the execution. You got Tyler who shot the video with Erica Kirk in it. You've got Tyler the executioner in Snake Eyes. So those 4. By the way, the Tyler is the guardian of the closed or open lodge. When lodge is doing their ceremonies or rituals, the person with the sword at the door to keep the eavesdroppers, the Cowans out, the spies, that's the Tyler. And the thing is, Tyler was caught 33 hours after. This does have all the hallmarks of a PSYOP, predictable stuff. You know, concurrent programming, drills, conspicuous symbolism. And that's all up for debate. What's the point of that? Is it red herrings? Are we talking about red herrings? Are these planted bits of misinformation to keep us chasing some kind of ghosts? Possibly. But the more I look at it, the more I think there's a template involved here. It's like a signature. We were recently talking about Catcher in the Rye and how frequent that is within the PSYOP entertainment complex's assassination scenarios, and how Catcher in the Rye has this subtext of essentially about a cult, a Masonic fraternity that kills its enemies. And so this book is looked at by some as a hallmark of who's behind the various events, like a calling card, I should say. But yeah, Tyler Robinson does have connections to Robin Westman from the Annunciation shooting, which has connections to the movie 217. And this is a reoccurring theme. There were also drills conducted at Utah before. Jamarian said, anyone else noticing time is speeding up? Hours, days, weeks flying by, even watched a 10-second countdown, and it seemed much faster than usual. Much less light in the world. Well, the days are noticeably shorter as we're getting closer to the solstice. I mean, it's definitely the case that there's less light. Daylight savings doesn't help, but are things moving faster, or are they just cramming more and more content into our everyday media consumption? I mean, you get so many hours a day. I heard the phrase attention economy, and I was like, okay, there are people out there who are trying to squeeze content into every single second. It's like Clockwork Orange, like where the guy's got his eyes pried open and there's TV screens in front of him. We're like that right now. Only we're doing it to ourselves. They don't need to drug us, strap us to chairs, and pin our eyes open. No, we can't close our own eyes. We're just like absorbed. This is Videodrome. Truman says, past week, all flags have been half staff. Yeah, that's Dick Cheney. I think they did it for Dick Cheney. And I heard people celebrating the death of Dick Cheney. I'm like, you're really caught up in these characters. Does anybody here agree with me that Cheney was given a fiery send-off? Like a Viking with a 9/11 theme, a Viking funeral? I'm not convinced that he died on the 3rd. He could have died a month ago and he could have been on ice. He could have died a year ago. I have no idea. But what I can say is that the timing of his death, the 11/3, obviously a clue there. I mean, architect of 9/11, One World Trade Tower opens on the 3rd of November. The timing of his death with the plane crash, 9/11 coded, the election of the mayor, the majorly pushed social media responses, the politician responses, the way they just piled the 9/11, flights delayed, 1,000 flights delayed by the FAA, bomb in Brooklyn injuring firemen, white powder sent to some politician. I was like, okay, we have this huge 9/11 flashback as Cheney dies. So this makes me think, okay, coordinated. So this was likely a ceremony. This was likely a funeral, or this was likely a send-off. Jamarin May says 8-4 is one of the predictions he makes all the time. Yeah, there are people who make predictions, and I understand the reasoning here. Pattern noticers, people like Jurassic Liars in particular. He's specifically known for dates. But what he needs to be given credit for here is that he has discerned, as we have, many repeated patterns, code. Sun, man, 6/11, 8/4, all these things are repeated throughout various events in these very specific contexts. So he talked about the significance of 8/4 and 6/11 and Trump and these ongoing scenarios. Well, Trump was shot at 6:11 p.m. They made a big deal about that. 84 days later, at 6:11 p.m., they had a moment of silence there in Butler. These are repeated clues that, and this is, again, this is not us ascribing meaning or signing this stuff. If you just look at the past precedent, this has pretty much always been the case. Like 9/11 was extremely encoded with numbers going back. I mean, on 9/11, 1941, the Pentagon breaks ground, for example. But what he has pointed out is that there's this predictive programming buildup. However, I have some differences of opinion here. We have different takes because I'm not a religious person, and I don't believe that the world's going to end or that there's going to be any revelation from a higher power. But I do see, and we have noted, a lot of this stuff for Trump. So if you think the Trump thing in Butler was real, one of the major hoax indicators are the dozen or so plus examples of real-time mass media entertainment reflecting what had happened, preceding it, or right after, or at the same time. Stuff that suggests here that this was the event, that what happened in Butler was the foreshadowed event, the foreshadowed assassination attempt and survival. It's not really in the cards. It's not really in the program for him to be taken out. Never was. It was always going to be surviving a shot like Reagan did. Recently, we talked about the Reagan shooting by John Hinckley, who was inspired by Robert De Niro, majorly Trump deranged, and De Niro plays a Trump-esque Senator McLaughlin who gets shot at a podium while talking bad about immigrants. So you have Robert De Niro, who not only plays a Trump character getting shot, but he plays a character in Taxi Driver who inspired Reagan's shooter. And that character overlaps with Joker, who shoots Robert De Niro on TV in the Joker movie. So he plays the role of the assassin and the assassinated, and he inspired a real-life assassin who happens to have JFK's birthday, talking about John Hinckley, and is photographed with a copy of Catcher in the Rye. Now, I got to double check this because Cheney dies at 84. Didn't the guy, okay, so you got Brady got shot with Reagan. I think he died on 8/4, didn't he? 33 years later. They said 33 years later, they ruled it a homicide. So De Niro's fascinating because you see him characterizing Trump in advance, this dictator, the gangster, he called him. And he also plays the anti-hero who's also connected with Joker. And so Joker is also embodied in Luigi. If you follow the Joker movie, it's Kill the Rich, class warfare, Luigi, kill the rich. And you saw the overlap between these two. The green hair, the green beret, Luigi and Joker have this archetype that's been tied into this class warfare thing. Interestingly, Luigi tried to kill Wario on SNL when Wario was being played by Elon Musk, the evil CEO. But Luigi, this anti-CEO sentiment connects with Joker. So for Joker to shoot De Niro, who previously portrayed a Trump-esque character, very connected. And then you go back and you look at Mickey 17, where Mark Ruffalo, who actually was born on JFK's death day, Mark Ruffalo is playing a Trump-esque character, and the Luigi-esque Mickey 17 shoots him while he's giving a speech. The bullet grazes his cheek, and he's got blood on his cheek. Sound familiar? And the director is like, that's just a coincidence. This movie was recorded 2 years ago. Okay, so coincidentally, not only do you have a Luigi-esque character, and Luigi hadn't existed 2 years ago, shooting the Trump-esque character who gets a blood streak on his neck after talking about colonizing a white planet. But this Trump character gets up on the stage and demands the media records him so he can show off the blood on his face. You know, like fight, fight, fight. So even that aspect of Butler was foreshadowed in this movie. Yeah, Adamski, De Niro's obviously acting in his reaction to Trump. In all his other interviews, he's demure. Yeah, so what they did is they had him call back his persona from his movies that he's known for, this tough gangster persona. That's why they brought him back. So a lot of these actors play roles on the world stage that their well-known characters lend credence to, gravitas. And I would say his Trump derangement is fake. And it was part of the characterizing Trump as somebody worthy of being taken out, turning him into a Senator McLaughlin, turning him into somebody who essentially, because of the inequalities in society, is justifiably killed by the Joker, representing the oppressed. Absolutely. I would say the same for Rosie O'Donnell. I would say the same for, well, Rosie O'Donnell probably really has Trump derangement syndrome. He did call her a pig. But Stephen King, okay, Stephen King, I'm pretty sure is faking his Trump derangement. And Stephen King was recently on this PR stunt. He was walking down a road with the number 47 around his neck. Well, that's from a movie called The Long Walk, based on a book that's like 42 years old. So the star of the book, the protagonist, is number 47. And they're playing in this game where they have to walk down the road at 3 miles per hour. If they fall below that, they get shot. So for Stephen King to wear a 47 around his neck, walking down the road, he's portraying himself as a dead man walking. And he's majorly Trump deranged. By the way, he wrote The Shining, which was used as a vehicle to show Kubrick's involvement in Apollo 11, but it also foreshadows 9/11. And the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep, has a psychic child or baby that foreshadows 9/11, that predicts it psychically. You know, Rosie O'Donnell said something really strange. She's like, that shooting in Butler was kind of hinky. So I had to bring out my dictionary. It's like, what does hinky mean? Hinky is basically means like hoaxy. So, okay, wait a minute. She called it hinky. My first thought was Hinckley, like John Hinckley, who shot Reagan. Jurassic Liars noted this, and he said, look at her name. Rosie O'Donnell, like Donald Rose, probably code. Adamski says Stephen King's works stink. You know, I never really got into it. I tried to read some of his books, and I felt like I could always get this, like he was like almost smearing middle America. Like there's a snootiness about it. Like how many times did he make truck drivers, you know, or these archetypes he would use, the bad guys. Like there was a certain type of, I don't know, elitism that I got from his books. I don't know. I have to go back and check. I've tried to read some of his books. I tried to read The Dome. I couldn't get into it. And I'm not a lazy reader, but I got to read Misery now that I think about it. I'm pretty sure I lived through that one. I'll give it another chance. Pope just met De Niro in the news? Well, De Niro was in another movie that came out recently called Zero Day, where he plays, I believe, Biden, because he's a former president who lost his reelection. So it's kind of like if I think it's if I got to watch more episodes. I just watched the first episode, but it's clear that he played this former president. So again, he's being associated with the presidency, and in that one, he's walking down the street towards the scene where a couple subways had been bombed, and he's giving some kind of a press statement. And there's this guy in the audience there in the crowd that has gathered, and people are like waiting for their loved ones. And he's like, "Oh, it's all just crisis actors. It's all fake. It's a hoax." And the mob goes wild. It's like, that's funny. Are they already trying to stir the mob against the people who call things fake? Like, why is that offensive? It's good news. It's like, hey, nobody died. How dare you? I cried over that. Oh, your tears are more valuable than their blood. Like, you want them dead to justify your tears. And what's kind of interesting too, this is ironic, is that after a major event like a mass shooting, you don't see any tears because their actors are all like Erica Kirk level, and all the blood is fake. So it's like, no tears, no blood. But then the next day happens, and someone mentioned this earlier tonight, how people get involved in the psyops. The next day, you got a candlelight vigil. Everybody cries. And Red Cross shows up to suck people's blood. So you got blood donations for the victims who don't actually exist, and people crying for victims who don't exist. So they get blood and tears, like major louche sacrifices after every one of these events. They get their blood. You might argue they get more blood from donors than was spilled from the fake victims. They get more tears. I mean, it's unbelievable how, well, no, it's totally believable. I call it the theater of Psywar because it is theater. It's bread and circuses, but it has tragedies. It's a tragic comedy. If I had to classify it, alien anthropologist here from Saturn, observing Earthlings. And from my perspective, I can't tell movies from news. It all looks the same to me. If I came down here, alien anthropologist, I don't know. I would think this place was very confused. Mango says liars can go to, well, this is the lie world order. And unfortunately, it makes liars out of us. If you're a believer in any of these things, you're a de facto liar. And until you can recognize where you've become a de facto liar, whether you've internalized lies or you have a way of processing media that makes you susceptible to just repeating fake claims, there's just no honesty. There's no objectivity. It's too subjective. Jamarian says, King always writes books about psychic children and the adults who exploit them. Firestarter is a good example, as is The Institute. Stranger Things has that theme as well. These psychic children. I can't wait to mind map out some of these mass shooters. This new generation of mass shooters that started the Audrey Hale, they all seem to come out of Stranger Things. And it all ties into the satanic panic. And there's some deeper levels of it, but they did make a major plot twist 2022 when they brought out Audrey Hale, who shot up the Christian school. Because remember, the right-wing neo-Nazi bowl cut shooters only shot public schools. And so the right wing was like, well, we don't care about public schools and we don't want them to take our guns. So it's an acceptable loss. So they didn't care. Then it changed. They started shooting up country music concerts. So then some of them started to care because, country music. But then it moved into, now they're shooting Christian churches, school children. And the shooters are Reddit, leftist, Antifa, satanic, Order of the Nine Angels, Nazi, gender ideologues. And it's like, okay, now they care. Truman says, Tim, are you still operating the space junk removal service? Yes, although mostly I tend to move furniture for people who get stuff on Facebook Marketplace. There's a little niche there. People go on Facebook Marketplace all the time. So recently, there was a family that was moving out of the country and they had a lot of furniture that was barely even used. And so a third party contacted me and they said, I want this furniture. Can you transport it for us? So I find that's not difficult to get gigs here and there. The last one I did, I was disposing of an old swing set. So it's been a little while, especially since I've been mobile. Which how long has it been? It's only been like 3 weeks. It feels like 3 months. Christian Bale's Batman had a fiery plane death. Faked his death to pass the torch to Robin. Christian Bale played Dick Cheney. Interesting. So Christian Bale's Batman had a fiery plane death, faked his death to pass the torch to Robin. Now, if you look at the cover of Dark Knight Rises, you see a bat-shaped burning hole in a building. It looks like a plane-shaped hole. And then you look at the 9/11 again, it's like, that looks like a Batman-shaped hole, Batman logo. And yeah, he played Dick Cheney better than Dick Cheney. It shows you the power of not digital deepfakes, but synthetic, hyper-realistic masks. Christian Bale looked more like Dick Cheney than Dick Cheney. And they talked about how they're exactly 33 years apart, both born January 30th. Bale was 44 at the time. Cheney was 77. So that is an interesting connection there because the Batman 9/11 stuff. And there's some Batman COVID stuff that's worth looking at. There's some Batman nuke stuff. Foreshadowing I'm talking about. But we'll have to do an analysis of Batman and Joker and how they play out on the world stage. I mean, this is really something that goes back quite some time. You go back to Batman being founded by, Batman's grandfather founded the Skull and Bones Society. So there's this lore attached to it. Then there's the predictive programming stuff. And then you have this repeated use of Joker and Batman as representative of basically Antifa and I won't say Proud Boys, but more like Patriot Front. So you have like the vanguard of the fascists and the vanguard of the anti-fascists. The class war represented by the vigilantes of each. Joker's like a vigilante for the poor. Batman's a vigilante for the rich. So you have Daniel Penny shows up after Marjorie Taylor Greene talks about the violence in the subways and how it's Gotham, implying they need Batman. So Daniel Penny shows up in a subway and he strangles a mentally ill Jordan Neely to death. And the right wing says he's a savior. He's like Batman. He saved those people from the unarmed homeless guy. So he was reviled. Daniel Penny was reviled by the left as a murderer, praised by the right as a hero. Then you've got Luigi Mangione comes out and he kills a CEO, shoots him in the back. So Mangione is praised as a hero to the left. In the class warfare context, he's like Joker, killing the rich is a good thing. But to the right, he's a villain because the right doesn't hate CEOs. They love Elon Musk. To them, it was murder. So it's not a coincidence that as Daniel Penny gets out of jail, Luigi goes in. Well, just as Daniel Penny has been compared to Batman and had the biggest give, send, go ever, I think Kid Rock gave him like 50,000. Luigi was comparable to the Joker, compared to the Joker. You got the same repeated themes I'm saying with these two individuals, Joker and Batman, right and left. The new Batman movie comes out. That was on 3/4/2022. And on that day, Joker, the Boston bomber, had his death penalty reinstated. Jamarin May says, QFC had a recent program on how fake local shopping centers are. Lots of businesses show people. Oh, I've seen videos like this. So that's quantum of consciousness. He said, fake local shopping centers, lots of businesses where people never frequent it. They're open for years. The real world is more fake than most people realize. Yeah, I don't know what that is. It seems like there's this perception of malls and stores as busy people shopping, but then you go and everything's like a ghost town. And I don't know if that means that these things are fake or if his expectations have been set by media and it doesn't match with the real world and he's experiencing this bit of cognitive dissonance. Well, what can explain it? What can explain the real world not matching the broadcast version? And I think people do experience a great deal of cognitive dissonance in these events. And the explanations are we live in a simulation or something. And the answer is yes, we do, but not in the sense of it being like some metaphysical model, but rather our mental version of things doesn't match the real thing. And that's because media is a liar and it conforms you to a worldview. It's not informing you about the real world. That's why it is important to touch grass. It reduces cognitive dissonance. I haven't listened to enough of his work to know where he's coming from, but as long as as long as he's not promoting that people really die in these events, there's probably a good chance that we have significant overlap. You know, we're all looking at the same facts. We're just arriving at different opinions about what these facts actually mean. And if your perspective is alt media, you're not going to arrive at the right conclusion ever. So Busy56 says, check out Pluribus. Pod people share the same hive mind and try to convert the one remaining person. Actually, she finds out there are 11 others in the world. Is that on Netflix? Because they e-grabbled me in my sleep. I didn't turn off one of my cards, and it's like, oh, you're a Netflix subscriber again. It's either Netflix or Amazon, whoever manages to pickpocket me in my sleep. But yes, I have access to both. So, and I didn't resubscribe Hulu, so I don't know what's going to happen next in the Erica Kirk saga. I only got as far as her faking tears on the world stage and being accused of being behind the assassination. Oh, it's on Apple. I could probably get that. I'll probably take a look at it tonight. Okay, now check this out. I started to watch Mr. Robot when I saw Netflix. It was like 3 a.m. I wake up. It's like I got to notice Netflix. So I just turn on Netflix. I'm like, well, what's on? Not because I want to predict the future based on what I see, but because I want to know what is saturating the minds of the programmed. So I know what kind of psyops, what kind of fake events, what's going to happen next on the world stage. So I turned on Mr. Robot, and I only got through about 5 minutes before I fell asleep. But from what I gathered, he's talking about how he has become convinced that all of the major events in the world have been staged and are controlled by the 1% of the 1%. He's like the top of the 1%. 1% of the 1% control the world, and that he knows how the world works now and that they're after him. Well, that's kind of interesting because that's kind of what we're talking about. So I might continue to watch it. Rylo05 says Calcified Lies had a great Die Hard breakdown. Yeah, Calcified Lies does some great work. He did a breakdown on Die Hard and 9/11. He's not off-world stage. He thinks that the Charlie Kirk thing was a ritual sacrifice, and that if you're in the Illuminati or you're in the club, you might get sacrificed. I asked QOC, says Adamski, if the YT shooter and Adam Lanza were real people. He felt they were. Yeah, if they're still stuck behind the bloody guardrail, they're in the duopoly. Their perspective, their point of view is alternative media. They are still part of the controlled opposition infrastructure. And I don't hold that against them. You know, I understand that there's only limited options out there, and so people aren't exactly handed the right answers. And if you look around, how many people have arrived at the correct understanding of what predictive and concurrent programming is and what its purpose is? There aren't many. Most people are stuck at incredulity. Most people are stuck at, let me adhere to the consensus default belief. Busy says, Pluribus seems pretty off-world stage. She's the only one who sees. They tell her it's amazing, you should join us. They're brainwashed and brain dead. I'll have to watch it then. Another one I would recommend is Hot Skulls. If you haven't seen Hot Skulls, it's about this world where mind viruses are spreading by word of mouth. If you hear them, you catch them. So the mind virus plague breaks out. And the ones who can listen to the mind viruses and not go crazy are considered hot skulls because they have ideas that they can verbally transmit and cause other people to go crazy. So you would consider me and you, we're hot skulls. We're mind virus super spreaders, but we're asymptomatic. So the main character is asymptomatic. He's obsessively gathering recordings to find out what everybody's babbling about. So he's getting all the mind viruses in his head. And they're called jabbers, which I think is a reference to anti-vax because it's about a quarantine, the world's quarantine. The government makes everybody wear earplugs. Instead of masks, earplugs. So if you see somebody without earplugs, you run because they might infect you with their mind viruses. Anyway, the protagonist absorbs all the mind viruses, and so he shows up as a hot skull and a threat to society, and they can't figure out why he's not going crazy. So he's like the number one asymptomatic super spreader. That's why you'll often see the cyborg penguins that I post with flaming heads. It's representing our hot skulls. Ooh, this is good. Lord Laney says Zardos was a good movie, shows how fake stories over time become canon fact. Yes. So if there's any takeaway from this conversation, it's that fake news becomes history, that our history is quite literally being manufactured in front of us, and that the major psyops are the historic turning points, are the plot twists. And they only need to fake a small percentage of the news because everything else bounces off of that. It permeates the entire media ecosystem, one. And then two, all of the quote real news rests upon the presupposition that all the preceding fake news was real. So you can make the case that everything's fake, not literally, but you can make the case that the fake news dominates and that the real news is just caught in the wake. So Zardos is on my movie watch list, and E Pluribus, oh no, yeah, Zardos. So tonight we talked about Plato Cave Dwellers and Westworld Syndrome. We talked about, going through my list here, we covered quite a lot of ground. Oh, I didn't get to this. One of the things I wanted to get into, and I posted it on Twitter, somebody posted some more videos of people with squibs. So one of the things that I've noticed and that he showed in this video here is that when somebody has squibs on their bodies and the squib goes off, there's force to it. There's a rapid ejection of liquid, and if there's a significant volume, the person's shirt moves around, their body moves, it jolts their body when the tube is suddenly spraying the liquid. And so when you see Charlie Kirk jerk when he gets shot, you see his hair flop and his neck seems to puff up. Yeah, that's all very squibby. Andrea says, Tim, I can't wait till you watch Severance. The role security levels plays into the plot will confirm. Okay, what you observe about them. Okay, I might have to continue watching Severance as well. I watched like the pilot. I refer to this as a security clearance society. The programmers are those who have security clearance to be let in on certain aspects and facets of it. No one's given the whole picture. Anufel says they create fake history to reach in school. Well, okay, so there's a question that I would ask is, when does news become history? Is yesterday's news history? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Because my contention is that history is the agreed upon version of things, whether or not it goes into our history book. But all of the fake news that we've observed, all of the news that has been bent by fakery, all of the psyops that are treated as real, those are printed in the history books. That becomes part of our official history. So fake news is made every day. Oh, one other thing, we were talking about the significance of Luigi and class warfare. Like, Luigi Mangione, Joker, green hair, green hoodie, Luigi, green beret. Then you had the green beret blowing up the Cybertruck at Trump Tower, the anti-CEO guy. So we're talking about this. Well, on the 21st, the second half of Wicked comes out. Well, the first half of Wicked ends with a Wicked Witch does an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, and blackouts the entire Emerald City. Well, Emerald City is Seattle. So she blacks it out. And the Wicked Witch is green. So again, you have the green thing like the Joker. Well, one of the things about Wicked, if you haven't watched it, is that it has a strong Antifa subtext. It's Antifa. If you haven't seen Wicked, you can tell that Jeff Goldblum is basically the Wizard of Oz is Trump, and that they are persecuting minorities, and that they're genociding the talking animals. They're mind controlling everybody. And the Wicked Witch doesn't want to take power in the system, and she rebels, and she ends up shutting it down with this big blackout, and then it ends abruptly. So the next part comes out later this month. I'm curious to see what that might portend, because they released the last one on 11/22, but it had a pilot, or a premiere rather, on 11/3. Dinah Southhart says, just like Jussie Smollett is old news. Yeah. Now, Jussie Smollett's an interesting case, because that was a hoax that was exposed. So once in a while, they will have a hoax exposed. So when people think of hoaxes, they think of a local event. Like this person, his friends tricked the news. So a hoax isn't when a group of people are tricking the news. No. That's why I refrain from using the word hoax so much as staged events, because the media is staging the event. They're part of it. You'll notice that the media started calling people hoaxers. Like, oh, these guys are calling it a hoax. They're hoaxers. No, that would be like saying that we are, that's crazy if you think about it. They're calling us hoaxers because we're calling the media's hoax fake. It doesn't quite make sense, because no, we're the ones calling you hoaxers. So it's sort of a projection or deflection and misdirection. I never quite understood how they got away with that, but now I know they did it strategically, because they want to create the perception that a hoax is an isolated incident, that it's the media is being fooled or something, and that if somebody tried to fool them like Jussie Smollett, they would expose it. If somebody lies like Brian Williams, they would expose it. When no, that's not the case. But what we have is this war of words, so that we can't get any solid footing to actually criticize them accurately. If you're at a magic show and you call a magic trick fake, they wouldn't call you a magician. It's just this strange form, almost gaslighty. Anufel says, well, they can lie about history in school, but they can't lie in other science like math, physics, biology. Well, yeah, there's a point where science becomes ideology, where it's not strictly the methodology. But one thing I'd like to point out here is the people who are caught up in this are all kinds of people. It's not like we're smarter than the average person and we saw through it. Like, that's not the case here. The fact of it is, it's not an intelligence thing. It's an immersion thing. It's an illusion that we're born into. And then it's reinforced. You don't get good grades unless you conform to it. But when people have other interests, why would they even care about this? But people are pretty much gullible when it comes to this specific area of life. Like, this is like the blind spot that everybody shares. Sort of like how people shut off their critical thinking when they go to church. Well, they shut it off in the sense that they don't judge it the way they judge news. They treat it as faith, that there's a different purpose to it. They don't look at it as critically. And that's acceptable because you're talking about religious faith. But people are approaching media in the same way. You think people are approaching media in an objective, skeptical, fact-oriented way? No. They're consumers of it. They're taking it in passively from trusted sources. Mainstream and alternative are both passive. The only active consumers of media, the ones who are taking the active critical role, are the ones who don't believe it right away because they know you can't just believe headlines. And there's very few people who qualify as media skeptics because the skepticism is always just one side versus the other. Mainstream, skeptical of alternative, and vice versa. Dick Nixon says, the physics of the universe, the most interesting to me, 447,000 miles per hour around the Milky Way. Yeah, the idea of miles per hour just seems ridiculous to apply at that scale. Where I am right now, at the edge, I can see the Milky Way. I hadn't been able to see it. There's so much light pollution in the cities. You could live your whole life without knowing what the night sky actually looks like. I think the space program is there to program the inner space, the space between your ears. That their objective is providing world view, context for our lives. And if you look at it, it's also, I think, part of the idea of enforcing the closed system, not just the world model as a closed system and therefore climate change, but also our mental model of the world is a closed system, closed to any information not coming from authoritative sources, approved sources. Now, when I say space is fake, or you hear that phrase, space is fake, we're not denying that something is up. But the way that space has been represented is more pageantry and theater and worldview building than an actual scientific endeavor that they're really exploring. I think it's pretty much the case that it's always been simply worldview warfare. All that money that goes to NASA, if they're not really preparing to take us to the moon or the Mars bases, or if they're not really going to make us multiplanetary, what's the point of it? Where's the money going? And I think it's interesting to look how Stanley Kubrick was involved in both Apollo 11 and 9/11. And who knows what else. And as my references for this, I'm citing a number of his films, conspicuous release dates. He released Dr. Strangelove, which has a 9/11 style low-flying plane attack. He released Dr. Strangelove on 11/22/63. There's been these fascinating connections. There's the character Joker in Full Metal Jacket, who's clearly based on JFK. There's a lot of connections, but what you see here is his involvement is not just in the outer space stuff, but the on the ground stuff. And I think he's likely the one who shot JFK in film. But looking at this, there's this account of Lee Harvey Oswald believing he was going to go work for NASA, along with others at the Riley Coffee Company. Well, those individuals disappear. They go work at Boeing or NASA, but Oswald turns up on the grassy knoll. But looking at the Kubrick connection between JFK and Apollo, it leads me to think that he did go work for NASA. But NASA is a bigger organization than we think. It doesn't just encompass space, but that it's mind war, the space between our ears, all psyops. Like the PSYOP entertainment complex could really be funded by the NASA money. I mean, that or they're building underground infrastructure. Like Mars might already exist as a place beneath Nevada or something. And Nofel says, yeah, I could give you that humanity haven't been above the alien stuff, but that doesn't mean the space explanation is fake. Yeah, I don't have any reason to believe any of the space travel is real, manned space travel or otherwise. I find it all very questionable. I need more evidence. I'm suspending judgment, but I'm not closed-minded. Show me the next SpaceX launch. Maybe I'll believe it. But I think we're so visually compromised when it comes to real versus fake as shown to us on the screen. And we can't go fact check. We can't reality test their claims. And I don't have enough faith to just believe it. But I do think that alien stuff has a purpose. How many generations, how many decades have we been inundated with this hypothetical alien invasion? But what happens at the end of the alien invasion? Well, it's always one of two things. Either it's a malevolent attack and humanity unites to fight it, or they're benevolent space brothers and they come down here and enlighten us, a higher intelligence. But the theme of the higher intelligence is the one that I'm kind of focusing on here, because alien invasion, AI, maybe alien invasion has just been preparing us psychologically for the advent of a higher intelligence. If aliens come down and they solve all of our problems, they solve hunger, they perfect our political systems, they work miracles. If aliens did these things, we would say, hey, humanity, let's unite under one government and let aliens tell us what to do. Especially if they bring out life extension and who knows what else. They bring out enough stuff, humanity is going to submit to the aliens. But aliens are fake, right? Now, what if they bring out AI that is significantly more intelligent than all of us? Is that not kind of the same scenario? So I'm wondering, are they going to bring about the alien invasion scenario using AI? Psyop Sidecar says, if you want to mix my shorts into your feed, you're welcome to them. Yeah, just post links in the Discord and I will add those into the 24/7 feed. So after this, I'm going to go back and set up OBS and open broadcasting software 24/7 Infinite Plane Radio. It's going to stream on Twitter. It's going to stream on DLive and on my other channel, the Infinite Plane Radio channel. And I'm going to maintain a 24/7 replay in order to bring people into Discord. I mean, I suppose I could do it on this channel. No, I want to keep it on the other one. I want to keep it separate to be just in case. Dinah Southhart said, Pope said they'd baptize fallen mankind. Yeah, I think they said they would baptize aliens. But look, the alien stuff has been a mainstay of sci-fi and predictive programming for a long time. They even used Independence Day, that movie Independence Day, to prepare us for 9/11, the alien invasion, illegal alien invasion or terrorist invasion. But I'm just saying hypothetically, if they bring out AI so intelligent that it radically evolves us in a number of areas of human endeavor, I think that that's checkmate. Yeah, the way you will know I'm live is I'm going to have it 24/7 on the Infinite Plane Radio channel. This one's separate. And what that one is going to be used for is to have a chat. I'm going to turn on an AI bot to engage the chat. And we want to bring people into the Discord server. Copaesthetic says, even if they did provide better visual evidence of space travel, the blindfolded skeptic will still auto-hoax AF due to the extraordinary claims. Yeah, something else to consider. If they get the visual effects so good that they can make it look like people are on the moon, there's inconsistent. There's a continuity issue here. It looked fake. It looked fake. It looked fake. Now it's real. So it's real. Is that how it works? That shouldn't work that way. Like, remember that SNL skit with the land shark? Like, he knocks on the door. He's like, mailman. Oh, the mail's already here. So he knocks again. Pizza man. I didn't order any pizza. He knocks again. Plumber. Oh, I ordered a plumber. They open the door. The shark comes in and eats them. That's kind of the mentality of people who are going to fall for these later space psyops. They're going to just forget the fact that the first ones were unconvincing. Cygirl says, Pope says since aliens were born without sin, they didn't need to be baptized to enter heaven. That's a great point. Space is the new heaven. Space as a concept has really been introduced as an iteration of the more archaic concepts of paradise and heaven. You ascend to heaven. The aliens are the angels of this new paradigm. You can be an atheist and laugh at angels. Oh, that's archaic. Angels. Who would believe in that? But you believe in aliens. But since you wouldn't baptize angels, why would you baptize aliens? That's a valid point. Yeah, Ollie Goering, I heard about that. Aliens and that to me, okay, the alien abduction scenario sounds like a bad joke. Couple of things about that. Whitney Strieber claims he was abducted by aliens and they probed him. So that's notable for a few reasons. He put out Communion, which is also an intriguing term in this context, which I don't want to get too far into it, but his books are good. I've read some of his books, but they all feed into certain things. He co-wrote The Coming Global Superstorm with Art Bell. Art Bell and Whitney Strieber wrote the first climate fiction. But anyway, the Air Force admits in that documentary, Mirageman, you can hear about this. They admit that they created the alien mythology, alien abductions. Yeah, the government made that up. But I think these are like reiterations of the Watchers, the sons of God and the daughters of men, aliens mixing with humans, hybrids, Nephilim, that kind of thing. I think that's what we're looking at. So my point is, aliens were created for the new paradigm. Space was created. These are iterations of traditional views fused with science fiction. It's called syncretism. And this is not a new thing. If you want to see a good example of syncretism, look up Serapis. So they combine regional gods to combine the people in these regions into a singular religious paradigm. So they merge a little bit of Zeus, a little bit of Osiris, a little bit of wine god, Dionysus. They mix these elements together, and you have this new god who does all these miracles, and he's just an amalgamation, a Frankenstein construct, but he serves the state because he unites everybody under the single paradigm. Well, that's what they've done with our modern worldview. I think it's a syncretic blend of traditional worldviews and science fiction, and it's all fused with their prefabricated history that's being fed to us, that we are consuming. A. Newful says, baptize the AI. Well, it's probably not a coincidence that those with traditional beliefs will see aliens as demons, and they see AI as demons. Did you hear Candace Owens? And these are predictable positions. She's woke right, red pill right. So of course she's going to say AI is demons, and that Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Peter Thiel are cyborgs who don't bleed if they're stabbed. Of course, Tucker Carlson is going to say aliens are demons and they're working with the Democrats, and one of them scratched him in the bed. You'll find that pretty much every single God construct that we're conditioned to believe in has a precedent in the Old Testament or New Testament. That's why I call the News Testament, Like one of the major stories of the Old Testament is the flood myth, God punishing man for wickedness. Well, we got climate change. And so I'm saying that religion has always just been a mask of government. Religion, entertainment, it's all part of the same structure. Erica Creech says AI would be hybrid human and machine. Adamski says, what happens if you're hostile to AI? Yeah, there's probably going to be some psyops with that regard, with that idea of like Luddites. I don't know what they're going to do. Like, how do you fight AI? I just see a lot of phobia, a lot of AI phobia. Candace Owens also suggested that the elite, I guess she's pointing at Musk and Peter Thiel, are sacrificing children to summon demons who then, I guess, become AI. I mean, it's very convoluted, but if you think she's arriving at these opinions by investigation and research are wrong, she's a propagandist. Truman B asks a Newfall, do you believe that Musk launched a Tesla Roadster into space? Yeah, that's something I would like to bring up as well, because there are people who will say that they know some events are fake, but they're not sure if the next one is fake. So it's like case by case. And they don't want to rule out the possibility that people did die. So I ask for the specifics. Well, name me which people really died at which event. And I always get a blank. So if you're open to the idea that space travel isn't fake, what part of it was real? Was the moon landing real? And a lot of people see through the moon landing, but they still think space travel is real and the ISS is real. And I'm like, you can't really build on a house of cards like that. Copaesthetic says, new video game Arc Raiders, people live underground because AI robots take over above. Side Girl says, Candace and Nick Fuentes will be saving Roman Catholicism in America. Nick Fuentes is a Poe. So is Charlie Kirk, for that matter. Challenger Hoax says, what do you think about the West Memphis 3? Do you think those kids were killed? I'm not familiar enough with the case. It looked like another true crime case. I saw it became a cause for various rock stars and tribute albums. It was some kind of injustice. There's some kind of a bias against them. I don't know enough about it. I don't know if it reaches the level of extraordinary claim, but I'd look into it. I mean, I find a lot of claims about serial killers to be questionable. I was immersed in true crime. I used to be obsessed with it. Like, I think I read all the true crime books by Anne Rule. And okay, so Anne Rule wrote The Stranger Beside Me. So imagine this. She's friends with Ted Bundy. She's writing, again, she wrote a book about it, but she's like writing about her experiences with Ted Bundy. I think it was called The Stranger Beside Me, but it was essentially about how they worked together at like a crisis hotline. And I wonder if she wasn't just a meta scripter. Like, if these aren't fictions. Like, did they write up the fictions of these serial killers as a form of protracted terrorism? Like the Nightcrawler is out. Ted Bundy's out, the I-5 killer. And back when the news cycles were slower, those could have had a lot more impact. They used Ted Bundy to merge intelligence being shared between jurisdictions across various states because he was killing across state lines, so they weren't connecting the dots. So you kill a few in Colorado, kill somebody in California, kill someone in Oregon, Florida. They may not connect the dots. And so his entire case was used to, I think, improve or change policing. So there's always some kind of a reason for every psyop. Maybe even the fact that he was like a Republican, fed into sexism on the right, objectification of women. Right now there's this like manosphere. So it seems like there might be some utility because you've had these incel killers who have kind of replaced the sexist killers, the Ted Bundy types. NDB says, Tim, why are you not at the International Truth Expo in Quartzsite, Arizona? I haven't heard about it, but I am rather interested in doing any kind of traveling to promote the Handbook for the Recently Deprogrammed. A Skeptic's Guide to the Theater of Psywar. I'm working on a series of whiteboards. Like I can break down events and make certain points. And I'm trying to work it down to where if I can spend 45 minutes talking, can I explain World Stage, Metascript, PSYOP Entertainment Complex, and proactive long-term manufactured history? And I think I can. Leo says, Tim just used the word Poe, like a peacock. Poe is Nick Cage's name in Con Air, where he kills Cyrus the Virus after a plane crash. Sargirl says, are we over Charlie Kirk yet? Seems like a burnout. What do you mean over? I mean, I think it's one of the best examples. It's a good case study. Like, I'm over 9/11. I'm over anti-vax. Yeah, that stuff's old. But no, the Kirk thing is still ongoing. Erica Kirk saga continues. And what Erica Kirk, what I call the Erica Kirk conundrum, what she has done for us is she has provided an example of a scripted world stage character walking in the footsteps of her corresponding entertainment character. And it's an ongoing thing. So anyone still stuck on it's all just a coincidence, there's no intentionality, has no legs to stand on. If you're going to say, oh, these are just coincidences, explain Erica Kirk. We'll be waiting. We're waiting for your explanation. Other than you guys need to touch grass. That's just ad hominem, by the way. Like, maybe I do need to touch grass, but that doesn't change the fact that Erica Kirk is mirroring her entertainment counterparts. Inulful says, Truman B3000, you got a better explanation for the stuff we see day and night in the sky than outer space. So you have to be careful about that because you don't see what I see. Like, oh, we can just see the ISS. We can just look up. Or you can see it. You can look up. Well, you can go see the Loch Ness Monster. You can go see Bigfoot. You can go see a chupacabra. That's called shifting the burden of proof. There is no we. Point to what you have seen and show us pictures. And a lot of people confabulate and lie. You think that the millions and millions of UFO sightings are real? No, these are people who see drones. And a lot of people are Mandela affected. So a Mandela affected person is someone who is susceptible to false memories. GS says, Abraham Lincoln was scripted. How far back does this go? That's a very good question. It's a valid question. I think it's as old as media. Kevin Mooring says, Vegas sphere is where we live. Yeah, we live in a giant Vegas sphere. I don't really trust any news purporting to come from above the Kármán line. And that's just because I can't fact check it. Like, I'll take your word for it. I'm interested in it. I love science fiction. But there's a point where it's like, okay, I get it. We live on planet Netflix. It's a media-infused hyper-reality. We live in the Disney universe. Does anybody know the date that Pluto the dog came to be? Because the planet Pluto and Pluto the dog simultaneously showed up in 1930. And if you look at the planet Pluto, it's got Pluto the dog's face on it. Look at the Death Star and tell me it doesn't look just like Saturn's moon, Mimas. And then how many logos do you have on Mars? You got the House of Stark from Game of Thrones, which is the Iron Throne. Fascinating symbolic connections there. And then you've got the Star Trek emblem. No, the sun, the moon, the stars are real, but rockets are fake. Rockets are pageantry. Rockets are burning, flaming obelisks. The symbol of Osiris, the earth god, and ascension, resurrection, recycling of souls, the cycle of life and death. I mean, the movies have been used to teach us all the old mysteries as well, but it's in an esoteric, exoteric way. Darth Vader is Saturn. Luke Skywalker is the sun. The sun rules the day. Saturn rules the night. They have a big sword fight. They cross swords a lot. And you'll see the cross symbol. And then the sun god, Luke Skywalker, gets his lightsaber cut off. Well, that's Osiris having his thing cut off. And then he hangs from the cross in Cloud City until he's picked up by his crew and his hand is reattached and he gets his lightsaber back. That's the story of the Prince of Darkness, Set, dismembering the sun god at sunset as night defeats day. The dismemberment of Osiris, the severing of the phallus represented by the obelisk, the lightsaber. Obviously, if you look at the symbol, the lightsaber, light is life. It's not hard to understand the symbolism here, but that's exoteric. It's just a sword fight. The public doesn't know the deeper implications of these things. I'm saying that space is heaven. It's a religious paradigm thing. Lincoln killed in the Ford Theater in his presidential box, says Busy 56. Yeah, Lincoln's blood all over the Ford Theater. JFK's blood all over the Ford Lincoln. There's a number of connections between JFK and Lincoln where their careers paralleled exactly 100 years apart. Yeah, Saturn rules the night. The sun rules the day. That's kind of this, like, okay, and this is in all the movies. The Terminator 2, Terminator. The Terminator is what you call the line at sunset where the sun sets and there's a bifurcation between night and day. That is the Terminator line. So the Terminator, with the one eye symbolism, is coming back to kill the savior, JC, John Connor, Jesus Christ. So John Connor representing the sun, the Terminator representing the dark side. And so you have, again, this fight between the Terminator versus JC, the savior. James Cameron, of course, major metascriptor. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy. Yeah, then you had one, it was like the shooter runs. There was something about where the shooter ran to. There's too many parallels to get into now. But the point of it is, it's an example of history having these indicators of some scripting when it comes to these major events, like story. There's something else that I think is fascinating. We have to map this stuff out, is when you look at the world stage characters and their corresponding entertainment versions, and then you find that these are like repeated themes across multiple years, multiple movies, where we've been told certain stories in a fictional form many times before they're enacted on the world stage. I want to do some more of these mind maps. I would do it now, but the sun is setting too soon. But we're going to do a lot of these. Again, it's a work in progress. Oh, that's a good one. Andrew Johnson, Lyndon Johnson replaced Lincoln and JFK. Yes. The 100-year stuff, like look at the other stuff, like when they get elected, there's other things that parallel. So how long have they been engineering history? Was history and news ever objective? And this is one of my other points too, is that news wasn't suddenly taken over by the deep state. It was always controlled. One of the more fascinating metascriptors that I'm looking into now is John Frankenheimer, Manchurian candidate, came up with a mind-controlled assassin, drove RFK to the Ambassador Hotel so he could be killed by a mind-controlled assassin. He was in the White House. And then you have the Kennedys. Jackie Kennedy apparently was into horror films or spy thrillers. And she made a film on September 22nd, 1963, where JFK gets killed. And they had the Secret Service help, and they use Heinz ketchup. I haven't seen the film. It's been buried for some reason. It was eerily prescient of what happened. It had some shots. According to the Vanity Fair piece, you see some stills that look like Zapruder's shots of the Ford Lincoln, same angles. But yeah, there's a Vanity Fair article about JFK staging his own death 2 months before his death. Yeah, that's the one. JFK killed by Oswald. Booth fled to Oswald Swan. There are so many of these things. But yeah, Booth ran from a theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and then was caught in the theater. And then there's some Wizard of Oz subtext. There's some Masonic subtext. There's Macbeth. I think the Wizard of Oz one has to do with Jack Ruby. Ruby Slippers defeats the Wizard of Oz. Jack Ruby kills Oswald. Jamarian May says, have you considered starting an IPS movie club? An examination of retro programming in older film. You know what? That's a great idea. I'll put that down too. So I already want to start a book thing. I want to get an IPS library. So once I'm in an office space, we're going to have a library, and I'll use media mail. We can freely send books back and forth because there's a number of books that we've hyperanalyzed, but we should also do so with movies. And we also need to build a parallel. I call it parallel media for a reason, because the controlled opposition is anti and the pro is against the anti. So there's this dialectic there that we don't want any part of. I'm not anti-media. Like, let them do what they do. It's a bread and circuses. You can enjoy it if you want to. We're doing something parallel to it. So we need to have a parallel record of events, that this is the mainstream version. Antifa killed Charlie. This is the alternative version. Netanyahu killed Charlie. This is the off-world stage perspective on this. You see, which would include drills, predictive programming, other content that leads us away from the other two. And we do this for every single event going back in time to Frankenheimer and the Kennedys. And obviously we can go further back. But what we need is a body of content that somebody who's new, yeah, Titanic would be a good one. Lots of books predicted the Titanic sinking. And the reason for that, I believe, is that they're telling stories in broad strokes. You got to see Francis Ford Coppola's movie, Megalopolis. The very intro talks about history and how empires fall and how it doesn't happen overnight, but there's stages for the story to be told. And I think the Titanic was part of the beginning of this story of the West sinking. And then you'll find these connections between the sinking of the Titanic, the sinking of the Twin Towers, and it connects to the future sinking or the falling of the ISS as that relates to the dissolution of this international solidarity above, the fall of this one world unity, this one world mission from Earth to space, one language, the internet, the Tower of Babel. Oh, by the way, the Chinese space station, there's an issue with it. They got hit by space junk. And now they're stranded in space. Hey, does Anulfo believe that the Chinese astronauts were stuck in space because debris hit their capsule? Chinese astronauts stranded in space after debris strikes the return capsule. A piece of space junk hit their ride home. It is space junk. They bought their space station from Temu. And they're wondering why it can't survive a Starlink satellite dinging against it. 3 Chinese astronauts stranded in space after debris hits. Struck by an unknown object. We should place bets. They're going to blame Elon Musk for this. They were already saying Elon Musk's space junk hit an airplane. And Nofel says, no, I don't believe that, of course. Okay, no, thank you for asking. And the reason I'm asking is that what can we say we believe or know to be true versus what we can merely believe? Like, yeah, they're sending, to me, they look like cylindrical blimps with jet engines, out of sight, out of mind. But then it always cuts to what looks to be CGI. Curterfest says, I can prove the earth is flat, flat tires, flat beer, flat. Okay. Well, the solar system's flat. So that's something. You ask any person who is insistent that flat earthers are insane. Ask them, well, what shape is your solar system? Oh, it's spherical. Well, what shape is the universe? Oh, it's expanding. It's a cloud. It's a big ball. No, your universe is flat. Your galaxies are flat. Your solar system is flat, with the exception of Pluto, who's like 17 degrees below the ecliptic. But that makes sense. Lord of the Underworld. Dick Lens Flare transitions. Nixon says, how about Barack Hussein Obama? Do you think he was a plant from the makers of 9/11? Obama catches Osama. In my opinion, it's blatant. Yeah, Osama, bin Laden, Obama, and Biden. I think these are all made up characters. Wasn't Osama bin Laden's like CIA name Tim Osman, which connects? This is could be subtext, because what was the whole story of 9/11? Like, broad strokes, from a history perspective, it was a clash of civilizations, the West, versus that's kind of what I think they were insinuating. And the idea was like this global jihad and stuff. But I'm pretty sure the name Osman, Tim Osman, there it is. Tim Osman, Osman, was a name that was supposedly assigned to Osama bin Laden. So that's been going around for some time. Osama bin Laden and the name Osman. Well, Osman is the founder of the Ottoman Empire. I'm like, that's interesting. There's some background to even that name that kind of corresponds with the general theme of Osama bin Laden in the West versus this global jihad. But yes, there are many who believe that Osama bin Laden was a totally fabricated character working for the intelligence agencies. Yeah, obviously that's probably true. The lead hijacker was 33-year-old Muhammad Atta, like Muhammad attacks, like Muhammad Ali Airport, like Muhammad Ali from Dearborn, Michigan, planning ISIS attacks. But yeah, Barack Hussein Obama was called out by then, I guess, just reality TV show guy Donald Trump as having a fake birth certificate. And that started the birthers. So the Tea Party movement, which is all about limited government conservatism, suddenly gets behind Donald Trump, who says, I'm going to expose Obama. I'm going to release the 9/11 files. So you notice back then, he started pandering to the conspiracy crowd back then, and drawing a lot of attention to Obama's birthday, which is also kind of intriguing, looking at how significant it has been since. But there's been this fight between Trump and Obama for some time. And this is all subtext. I was talking earlier about movie characters and their corresponding real life personages and how they tell stories over time. So Barack Obama represents well, this is kind of how it's framed, because you got like far left, far right, woke left, woke right. And the far right extreme is represented under the year 1776. And 1776 was all the rage when 2021's January 6th insurrection happened. So 1776 represents like the right wing at its most extreme and revolutionary. Well, the left begins 1619. They're associated with this idea that no, America's founding needs to be more inclusive of the transatlantic slave trade and those who are here first. So Obama, 1619, Trump, 1776. That's the dialectic. And there's been this antagonism between the two. And the subtext is maybe Obama was behind the assassination attempt. This is why they removed Obama's portrait and put the picture of Trump with his fight, fight, fight pose where that portrait used to be. But now, if you look at the various examples, and this is where it gets intriguing for the concurrent and predictive stuff, where let's just start with the, I guess, megalopolis. Megalopolis is Megalon. It's make Rome great again. And by the way, I'll get into that later, but make Rome great again. Like, how is that not MAGA? So you have this MAGA subtext in this movie, Megalopolis. The main character, Caesar Catalina, is based on Trump. He survives an assassination attempt. Well, the assassination attempt was arranged by the mayor, played by the actor Giancarlo Esposito, the chicken man from Breaking Bad. So you have Catalina, Trump, and this assassination attempt. So then I look at another movie, Captain America, Civil War. Harrison Ford, shot at the podium in the trailer, which came out the day before Trump was shot. Marvel Comics changed it as a result. He becomes the Red Hulk, which I think is a MAGA reference. But his enemy in that movie is the same actor. He plays Sidewinder. So you have this repeated antagonism between these two characters, but the same actor. And we've seen this repeated theme where in these various movies where the Trump character gets shot at, his antagonist seems to represent Obama. This was true in Tom Wolfe's novel brought to life, Man in Fool, where Charlie Coker, this disgraced real estate magnate, it's all just perfectly coincided with Trump's life at the time. Well, he's taken down by the Chicago mayor, obviously an Obama character. But I've gone through numerous examples of the same dynamic set up where there's always been this Trump-Obama antagonism because what they each represent at their extremes, at the extremes of the political spectrum, but that these reinforce this general theme that's been ongoing for many years. Kevin Morgan says, don't forget sports are, well, that deserves some qualification. Like you can say wrestling's fake. Well, no, it's real, but it's simulated combat, but there's still real athletics. There's still real doing stuff, but the outcomes and the plays are all staged. So we're pretty much insinuating here that, yeah, there's quite a lot with sports where you could make the case that it's highly scripted. Scripted might be a better word than fake. Sly Girl says scripted by PR consultants. Yeah, easy. It's not difficult to make the case that it could be scripted. I got to see that movie Him, by the way. But look, you can't touch sports. I mean, you touch news, people get mad, but you touch sports, people get really mad. They want to think that sports are pure. Like, oh, yeah, they created this massive global infrastructure for mind control, and somehow they forgot to corrupt sports. No, news is corrupt, movies are corrupt, comics are corrupt, video games are corrupt, all the podcasts, all the influencers, everything is corrupted by the PSYOP entertainment complex to create this ubiquitous, inescapable echo chamber, except for sports. Oh, baseball, football, basketball, no, that's pure. No chicanery, no manipulation, no scripted propaganda inserts. No, it's all pure. Penguinotti says there's zero proof Lincoln was scripted. The only proof is that JFK was patterned on him. Lincoln could have been real, but JFK is assuredly fake. Yeah, that could be true too. Like, let's say the Lincoln thing really happened and the JFK was templated off of it. That's an intriguing proposition. I'll have to think about that. Really, there's got to be something else to it. I know I was looking into John Wilkes Booth, but I don't know. I have to look. How absurd was the story? But it'd be a good idea to figure it out so we can get an idea of, like, when do they begin worldview consolidation through media in order to replace the religious paradigms? When did that happen? Fascinating question. Very interesting. Kind of lacking a lot of photographic evidence. We would need that. Ribo Nation says gambling is currently destroying sports and will pull back the curtain and reveal it's scripted like wrestling. American men will revolt. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. The story of the Lincoln assassination, was it absurd? I have to know. Like, I got to get into the details, because I remember there was something about him. I don't know. I don't want to get into it now, but there was something about the shooter. I came across some things, but again, I want to look into it closer because I'd like to know, like, yeah, when did news become the world view consolidator, and how long ago? The Titanic's a good start. Andrea says, watch pre-code Hollywood. It's always been there, in my opinion. Goes back to radio, actually, and the printing press and human nature. Side Girl says, Wilkes Booth was a media star, an actor from a family of actors. Yeah, wasn't it Johnny Depp? He's like, when was the last time an actor? And he insinuated that an actor could do another Lincolning. But thinking about this, the advent of movable type press was a major disruptor. We're talking about worldview consolidation suddenly being dispersed. That's what movable type press meant. It's like the internet. Like, now you have more voices. Now you got bloggers. Now you have real-time news corrections. So there's a lot of things you can look at where it suggests that when the consolidation over the printed word and the monopolies over education, the literacy, this ignorance as a form of, pacification of the masses, relative ignorance. We're talking about elite control over the masses through information control being disrupted with movable type press. Well, wouldn't their immediate response be to take that power back? Like, look, our power has been disrupted because of the printing press. How do we get it back? Well, we take over all the news printing agencies. Somebody posted Miles Mathis. Yeah, Miles Mathis is great at stating the obvious. It's not hard to call something fake, but his approach seems to be more about genealogy and suggesting that if you can connect these actors with their given names with, oh God, with certain names, that it's unequivocally a hoax. Abraham Lincoln assassination was fake, hoax, false flag, gay Jewish actor, Booth. Yeah, I like Miles Mathis's meticulous articles. These are opinion pieces, but it always comes down to they did, them. his particular they. Let me see what he says. Why would the pistol shot be muffled? It should have echoed in the theater. Why would he jump down to the stage? Booth was said to have had a stick which he jammed into the door of the presidential box to keep everyone from coming in. He was a rebel sympathizer. We were told he was a rabid Confederate supporter. Once on stage, he held off every man with a knife. Yeah, he does seem very incredulous, which again is not necessarily a good argument. Following the assassination, the government appropriated the theater, with Congress paying Ford $100,000 in compensation. He says, we should, this is Miles Mathis saying, remember how they tore down, confiscated all the crime scenes after 9/11, after Sandy Hook? That's how it's done. It's a sign of a staged event. He is correct there. I mean, what did they do after they took out Charlie Kirk? They took down the scene of the movie. They took down the movie set. Okay, I'm scrolling down. I don't see anything here that I can jump on immediately, other than calling the story ridiculous and a lame story. And he's looking into the ownership of the theater. I don't know. I'm going to have to look. It's a 42-page document, milesmathis.com/Lincoln. A death mask of Abraham Lincoln that was made in April of '65 directly from his face. It's on display. Yeah, I'll have to look at this a little more closely. I'm pretty certain that JFK was squibbed. Kevin Morning says, elected to the presidency 100 years apart, Lincoln 1860, Kennedy 1960. Yeah, there's every indication that the JFK thing was templated off of Lincoln. Every indication. So let's say Lincoln was really assassinated and they were going to stage the JFK one. Well, they would certainly draw inspiration from that. I could see why they would. Busy 56 says all the conspirators have model headshots. Yeah, it does seem like they kind of gave us a Lee Harvey Oswald demeanor to Tyler Robinson. And also, the conspiracy theorists consider them both to be patsies. At least they didn't kill Robinson. Although there's a lot of conflicting accounts over what he did and did not admit to. On the day of the JFK assassination, you can hear the news commentators talking about lapses in security for Garfield and McKinley, that they seem to be setting the stage. All right, well, this has been interesting. We are going to have phones open again, numbers on the screen. There's about 3 minutes left if anybody wants to call in. But I'm going to make phone calls a regular thing. Archives are going back up. So the 24/7 stream has all been updated. There's 11 hours and 9 minutes of new content. I will be updating it continuously. And I'm going to turn on a 24/7 stream, and I'll send you a link to the backup channel and wherever else it'll be streaming, and it'll be used to grow the Discord server. And also the chat room is going to have an AI bot. I'm working on an AI agent to deploy so we can really interact. See, the AI bot that I developed has a knowledge base that consists of everything that I've blogged and written. And that's going to go into the chat rooms, the various chat rooms on these live streaming platforms, and answer questions and direct people to Discord. So we should see some growth in the Discord server here very soon. But a lot of great points raised by the chat tonight, very active chat. And we're only on 3 platforms. You know, I'm just a few days away from scaling up. I'm going to get the business scale of the Restream. I'm on premium. I'm going to get business, which means like 8 platforms. And that will make it possible to do a lot of other things as well. like, for example, longer pre-recorded premieres. It'll definitely bring in more people. But the 24/7 stream is going to be a little minimalistic at first. I'm not sure if I have the bandwidth to stream video. I'll test it. I don't want to deal with crashing. And so if it's just audio and slideshows, that's where we're going to start. But the important thing is just to get it started, not wait until we have everything perfect, so that when I get into a studio, we can kind of hit the ground running. And we are going to do the IPS Movie Club and Book Club. Definitely a worthwhile endeavor. And we're going to build out the content for Parallel Media, including our own wiki, which has the multiple perspectives. So think about it. Wikipedia has one perspective, mainstream. We want to have a parallel record, but mainstream / alternative / off-world stage. We want to divide it into 3 columns. And these are the 3 ways it can be looked at. The duopoly, main and alt, or our way, which is inclusive of media fakery, systemic, special effects, long-term media fakery, psyops, prefabricated history written in advance, etc. So our informed disbelief will be the 3rd column to go beside the fake and alt. Yeah, and I'll be live with Fakeologists on Monday. That's a weekly thing. And we will also be live tomorrow. And if I'm out somewhere, out in the Cottonwoods painting or something, I'll probably stream from there. Plain Dakota says, someone call in, I would, but long distance scam will get me. Well, you know, I could probably use Discord with this setup. I need to optimize it for audio, but having a separate laptop, I have a Chromebook here that is open with the phones, but I could open Discord here and it would make it, I think it'd be the same exact thing, as far as making it possible for you to get in without having to pay long distance. The number is 505 510 4226. It's on the screen. If you look at the screen, you'll see a cyborg penguin in front of the rings of Saturn, and it says call now. But yes, I'm going to make Discord an option as well. I just have to log in. It's not going to happen right now. I have to confirm I'm not a robot, use my authenticator. But yeah, I'll make that a point in the future. I'll see if we can get multiple ways for people to get in here. And hopefully the audio works just fine. We had a caller. It was a little muddled at first, but it got better after a second. Again, if you're on Spotify or if you're being updated again, finally, it's been weeks. Infinite Plane Radio.
This is landline sound. Does this come through pretty clear?
Yeah, loud and clear. Lima Charlie, thanks for calling.
Yeah, so I just, just to test the line, calling in, and we haven't heard from a while. Is John the plumber down there, and I guess he's in Florida, right?
Yeah, that's right.
John Cordone. Yeah, I was kind of curious to hear his commentary on some issues.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling. And yeah, I want to get your take on things as well. Like, we've had a lot happen. What do you think about Dick Cheney's death day, followed by a plane crashing in a very 9/11-ing way? What's your opinion?
Well, when Dick Cheney came up on Fakeologists the other night, all we could think about was, I remember you extensively covered Christian Bale's representation of Cheney in was it the movie Vice?
Yes.
And how stunned everybody was by how lifelike, how realistic the simulation was. The point being that Hollywood already has that kind of silicon masking technology and everything else. So that was how we looked at it and said, well, that raises the question of how often were we seeing one Cheney if he's that easy to simulate, there could have been multiple Cheneys out there. The significance of Cheney to me is if he were still around, he could have been arrested as a 9/11 perp because he is documented as having been in command of several of the drills or exercises, simulations that were taking place that morning on 9/11, and actually was in the bunker. And then there's a story about him and I keep thinking Norman Mineta, the Secretary of Transportation, who supposedly was running back and forth to Cheney, reporting on the progress of Flight 93 as it approached.
Right.
Washington. So
Did you see the picture of Cheney with his feet kicked up, watching the Twin Towers burning?
It made me think of Hillary. Another shot they showed us of Hillary Clinton sitting somewhere in a White House bunker, briefing room, watching. It might have been Gaddafi getting sodomized with a knife that she was watching.
No, it was some kind of base that was being overrun. What was it called? I think it started.
Oh no, you're talking about the Benghazi.
That's what it was, Benghazi.
Well, yeah, there was so much. I got to tell you, I followed that because David Petraeus, General Petraeus, he later was appointed to run the CIA. He had married, in order to advance in the Army, he had married the wife of the base commander, who was not exactly much of a looker, from what I understand. And so he constantly was involved in scandalous affairs.
Yeah, Betray Us. I mean, what a world stage name.
Well, it's crazy. He really got involved in a scandal with this military photographer named Paula. I got to look it up again. It's there. I'm having a senior moment.
But I recall the picture of Hillary Clinton, totally staged.
Well, she was this photographer was going around selling her book. She had a biography. She was the official Army biographer of General David Petraeus, and she'd written a book. In order to do this book, she followed him around, gotten to know him, and I guess he was sleeping with her, allegedly. But the thing is, she couldn't keep her mouth shut, and so she was lecturing an audience at the Air Force Academy out there in Colorado Springs, and started mouthing off. She says, well, I know what really happened in Benghazi. She said there was a weapons exchange taking place or other agreements with Islamist groups and negotiations that were going on, and there may have been some hostages held. But one way or another, she said, she also said she thought there was some enhanced interrogation going on in the basement there of prisoners. And she revealed this to a large audience at the Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs, and then subsequently, because there was a highlight focus on her relationship, Paula Broadwell. I can't believe
I saw this meme. It said, pouring out a shot for Dick Cheney.
Petraeus had to resign because of this. And that is really how the Benghazi thing became a scandal. But the other thing was that they released this video called Innocence of Muslims. They tried to say that the release of an amateur video worldwide was what had triggered whatever was supposed to have happened in Gaza. We were told that some Islamic militants, or that somebody raided a U.S. consulate in Benghazi and killed 2 Americans there, Sean Smith or something. I forget that. One of them, his mother, still runs around all the time memorializing him. And she's very convincing. I would like to have people do an analysis. We have some fairly good critics now in our milieu generally of crisis act performances. I want to make this a regular thing. Like, I want school kids to be, as soon as these events are reported.
Well, I would say that the Erica Kirk takes the cake. I mean, she beat out Robbie Parker.
I'm nominating Erica Kirk for Crisis Actor of the Year. And David Hogg was 1 year, Robbie Parker was another. But definitely Erica Kirk. And it's already early in the year. Well, no, it's late in the year. It's late.
Yeah, we're going to have award shows later. We'll have to have some kind of Golden Hockey Awards. But anyway, I was saying, I saw this meme. It was somebody pouring a shot onto a person being waterboarded. And it said, I'm pouring out a shot for Dick Cheney. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, one thing we got into the other night was, and maybe you were in the military, maybe you could shed some light on this, was the whole Abu Ghraib narrative fabricated, which of course I think Seymour Hersh is the one who uh, publicize it the most. Were there in fact abuses of prisoners at this prison that used to be allegedly one of Saddam Hussein's torture chambers? So we were told.
Yeah, I've seen those pictures, and I mean, they're gross. I don't know. I mean, it looks to me.
From what I read, because I read some of the transcript of the court martials, Lindy England, she was one of the officers in command, and she and her boyfriend were both the commanding officers at this location. And they were two that were court-martialed. I don't know if there were any others that were court-martialed for Abu Ghraib, but I read some of the sentence and the conviction, and all that stuff. And they actually confessed to doing a lot of the shit that they did, but most of it to me sounded like they were humiliating the prisoners. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
not
sure.
Physically torturing them, but like making a prisoner. I think they were making a prisoner.
Yeah, I think I read about it. It sounded like they turned it into some kind of perverse situation. Yeah. But I mean, I don't have any reason that's real. I mean, when it comes to like calling things fake, you have to recognize, is it extraordinary? And that didn't...
Like I say, people in the fakeologist chat room were coming at me saying that Cy Herschel's, everybody knows Cy Herschel's a liar, that he made this. And I don't know. Cy Herschel's the guy that did the My Lai massacre back during Vietnam times. Boy, that's ancient history. Now we get into that. Were any of these massacres real? What about Haditha? The Haditha massacre, or Fallujah? We were told that U.S. military could practically level, they had to destroy the village to save it. That's another Vietnam phrase. But how much of this is real? Because every time I bring up this is a history I remember, people say, they fed your head full of bullshit. It was all psyop. Yeah,
we have a lot of work ahead of us. So I look forward to more calls, though. So thank you for calling, and everyone said this sounds good.
Let me move on. All right, be listening. Bye-bye.
All right, see ya. All right, thank you for helping me test out the phone lines. There is General Lynn, Cy Girl in the chat. Cy referencing one of those weapons. I think, is it Donatello, one of those Ninja Turtle weapons? And yes, there's quite a lot that we have to re-examine. Like, we were told this happened. Yeah. We were told a lot of things happened. And when you look at the scale of fakery, long-term engineering, the scope of something like a 9/11 with 88 drills going on, all terror drills, you go through all of that. It's like, well, these other things are small. Oh, Raphael has the Cy. These other events are small by comparison. I mean, we're talking about historic events, though. Like, the reason why these various events that we talk about get talked about is because they're impactful. They're absorbed into our worldviews. They're part of our collective narrative. These are the outrages. These are these massacres, these slaughters that steer events. And is there any reason to think any of it is happening outside of the theater of Psywar? I mean, the Abu Ghraib thing, yeah, that could be manufactured outrage. I don't know if they have to be all actors in on it. I mean, there are sick people who can be prompted to do things, but I don't know. All right, this has been great. We tested out the phones. It's only going to get better. And I'm going to go set up the 24/7. So look in your inbox later tonight. I'm going to send out archives. Although this one might take until tomorrow. YouTube takes like 3 hours to process, but I should have it. But anyway, I'm going to send out the archives with the synopsis. I'm using notebooklm.google to give me a synopsis with quotes. So if you want to know what we talked about on any live stream, you go to the newsletter, you can read the breakdown, read some pull quotes, and the video's right there. I'm also putting it out on the podcast streams and the 24/7. It's going to loop. The last 11 hours and 9 minutes has just been put into a loop. And then I'm going to add tonight. So we should clear 12 hours. My objective is to get, 24 hours in a cycle of just content covering a week or two. And then I'm going to start, moving along, just deleting the older ones as we go and trying to keep it current. And I'm also open, if anybody wants to, like Leo Pirate said he wanted to call in. What we should do is, so earlier we were talking in the Discord. We cover a lot of things in Discord about Masonic Mormonism and their connection to Zionism. Interesting stuff. But I'd like conversations where we could record in Discord conversations about specific topics, and then I could premiere those separate. So we don't always have to talk live. I have a lot more free time. I am actually free. I am unleashed. So it's very easy for me to sit down in Discord and record conversations. And I want to create more content to put into the loop. Kevin Mornings is fun as always. Yeah, definitely. All right, well, I'll see you all in Discord. If you need the link to get into the Discord, go to ips.monster. Yeah, here we are. All right. Hey, what's up? Thank you for calling.
It's Leo Pirate. Long time no talk, man.
Yeah, we haven't talked since Charlie Kirk was still around. Since before that, even.
So what are we going to start measuring?
Like how many psyops ago have we talked? It's like at least 2 or 3 psyops back.
We should start measuring an AK after Kirk. Is that like what the new?
The Church of Kirkianity, yeah.
It is surreal because he's earlier in the stream. Sorry for arriving so late, and I was eating food while listening to 2x speed. I heard you say Kirkianity. I had said that just earlier today before today's stream, and I was like, wow, amazing how much on the same wavelength we are. But I got to catch up to watch the rest of the stream. But hey, I was just testing out the system, making sure you hear it, because I know you've been streaming for 3 hours. I imagine you probably don't want to have a long conversation with me.
Yeah, well, we're 3 hours and 16 minutes in, but phones are back on, and yeah, so now I'm going to be opening up phones for basically hour 2 and 3 from now on. So first hour, I'll be monologuing and going over recent content, but yeah, phones are going to be open up again. So if there's any topics that we need to catch up on, we should just schedule it. We should just do it, and we'll catch up.
Sure, especially because I agree that like the findings I have on Mormonism would be really good as a condensed, focused conversation or a soundbite from Discord that you could kind of keep separately rather than having it buried in a long call-in show.
Exactly.
So kind of save.
Exactly my point.
My research for that.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk about any topic into any level of deep nuance, and exactly, it won't get buried, and it'll be titled as a separate podcast.
Perfect. And the thing is, I guess not related to world stage stuff, but related to some of your earlier work. I remember one of the first PDFs I had found from you was like how to control a codependent on like narcissism. And I don't want to get into my personal life, but let's just say I too have been throughout my entire life I've experienced this, right? But more recently I had kind of a situation, and I've just been doing a deep dive into the more recent scientific literature and research into it, and it's uncanny how similar it is to the world stage.
Yes.
The triangulation, the setting people against each other, constantly changing masks of like what's right and what's wrong, the charm to harm. I think the left wing, the LGBT kind of group, got the charm, and now they're getting the harm, and now the right wing is getting the charm.
Yes, the scapegoat and the golden child of switch, there's triangulation, and that's what I've been picking up on this, is that it seems like you can look at the macrocosm of the world stage reflected in the microcosm of the emotionally abusive relationships and the general structures these things take, where it's the same manipulation tactics.
And the kind of hate you're getting for the very valid world stage connections you're making reminds me of if you call out a narc on their lies. They call you crazy. They push buttons.
Oh, right.
They gauge your reaction. They try to make you as angry as possible so that when you rightfully call out their lies or their manipulation tactics, you're the one who looks crazy. And they just go, oh, well, hands off. Hey, whoa, calm down.
Oh yeah, you call out a manipulator on their tactics, and they'll project it onto you. And then you have the media calling you a hoaxer for calling out their hoaxes. It's that's why I have said that Big Brother has got to be a narcissist.
Absolutely. And I will say, just sort of in general, your conduct in your show is remarkably calm, professional, level-headed. It really, if anyone calls you, crazy, it's just because they haven't watched your content long enough or interacted with you long enough. And that's, to be expected. I, too, have been called a younger slang term, as you to call someone schizo. They're always like, oh, schizo, if the perspective you provide is outside of the parameters of the established MSN and MSN Plus view.
Yes.
But it's very, very interesting stuff about the 9/11 kind of overlap with Dick Cheney. It's kind of undeniable. It's like you said, either God has a sense of humor or this is subconscious programming.
Then you throw in the Muslim mayor and the reaction there. And to me, I'm like, okay, that's way too concerted, too perfect. And it seems to me that, yeah, that's another example of where this has all the hallmarks of being scripted. And then you find out that there was a drill at that airport with 150 casualty simulation actors a few weeks before.
Yeah, this checklist you've made of like concurrent predictive programming, drills occurring at the same time, it's so repeatable and predictable even. It kind of becomes undeniable. And I was in the box for a long time of thinking that predictive and concurrent programming correlated with them planning a real event. The biggest thing I got from the think tank was that connection where it's like, if an event has predictive and concurrent programming, that means it's staged and it's fake. No one died, no one cried. For me, I joined the think tank back in August of last year with you pointing out the machete connection to Donald Trump and Butler, Pennsylvania, how it's like a parallel scene to the xenophobic senator giving a speech right as he shot at with a failed assassination attempt. And I already thought, I'm like, yeah, this event is fake. Yet there's predictive programming for it? I thought that was only for 9/11, and it's actually for everything.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big one. And then you see De Niro inspired Hinckley shooter to shoot Reagan. And then De Niro also plays the guy killed by the Joker. So you find him playing this role on the world stage through his movies and otherwise of basically caricaturizing Donald Trump, creating this version of Trump that is someone that we would hate. And then he plays the anti-hero who takes him out. And then he influencers that's crazy there. The same actor plays the role of the assassinated and the assassin, and then he inspires a real life assassin. That's a lot of overlap.
And I've thought about these poles, the two extremes, even with the narcissist. The charm that they give is so real. They look into, and then the harm is also so real because it's very personal. And kind of having De Niro playing both the assassin and the assassinated, those are two opposite enemies. And it kind of synthesizes in the middle in your mind. You on your own come to whatever conclusion you're trying to sort of crystallize in the minds of world stage audience. I think this probably explains why earlier you were saying it's like Candace Owens is the face of, this white supremacy, anti-Israel stuff. And it's like she could only say these anti-feminist things and, pro-life things because she's a black woman. So it's like very strange how they kind of put these two extremes, blending them together to drive a point in a very, unnatural way that normally honest conduct and honest conversations are carried.
And then she's super close with then Kanye West, who was the black skinhead on the world stage. He even wore the black skinhead mask. So I'm like, okay, what are they doing exactly with this? It seems like they are doing this, like Nick Fuentes, for example, face of white nationalism. And you got this like basement dwelling, mixed race, unmarried, 30-year-old virgin talking about you need to have a trad wife and have 20 kids by the time she's 25. I'm like, come on. You're talking about this archaic lifestyle. Women can't vote. They just have babies. But then there you are living in your mom's basement at 30, and you can't even claim to be, pure enough to represent the white nationalist blood purists. So it's all super contradictory.
Yeah, and the super contradictory aspect lends credence to the confidence trick. Because it's so obviously false, if you think for more than 5 seconds, it almost makes you shut off the thinking for 5 seconds to do away with the cognitive dissonance, and you just follow along with the Pied Piper. You just kind of don't think, even though obviously your intuition and basic thinking is like, this doesn't make any sense. You just go with it, and in a way, it's almost like, wow, this is so radical and different. But if you see the patterns, it's like, no, this is actually typical. Right? And that's when I see the charm to harm stuff, the triangulation, the kind of the idealization, devaluation, discard. It's impossible to unsee it on the world stage. And even certain people, when I look back on certain friendships and relationships in my life, I'm like, yeah, they never would ever admit they did anything wrong, ever.
No, exactly. They will never admit. There's no accountability, and the media is the same way. The psyops never get corrected. It never changes. And the thing is about gaslighting, it's so subtle, because what gaslighting does is it instills self-doubt in the target, and they replace their trust in self with trust in the gaslighter. So what media consistently does is it gaslights our perception so we trust more in what it says. And this is systemic gaslighting, which is a form of emotional and psychological abuse, to be honest.
Yeah, the cognitive sabotage that makes you dependent on the abuser for reality. And that makes a lot of sense. And another tactic NPD, sort of people do is isolation, trying to cut you off from people. And you said that with the red pill, now the dream turns into a nightmare. And naturally, it's like now this person turns agitated, and the only people they can listen to is their online niche headed by an extreme pundit.
Oh, yes.
Imagine if the only source of information they're going to be getting is from their online echo chamber, that will then be reinforced in whatever version, whether it be the far left or far right version.
Yeah, I pointed this out to people before as like advice. I'm like, if you bring up this stuff to normies, you're going to alienate yourself. And then that makes you more inclined to bond with your online cult. And that is very much in line with cult programming, or even controlling relationships, where if they can isolate you and then become your sole focus, then they pretty much have you, because now your only way to have your socializing needs met are by staying in the echo chamber. And I'm like, don't echo chamber yourself. That's how they get you.
Yeah, and the compartmentalization is another huge thing. Narcissists, once they've isolated you, they have multiple targets for supply, and they don't want them talking to each other. And we see that being implemented online with the new restrictions on YouTube comments and stuff, where they have top comments by default. So that means each logged in user sees a different array of comments based on their profile's past interactions and information. So two people, like a far right-wing person and a far left-wing person, they go to a YouTube video, they will see a different set of comments unless they click on the show with sort by latest.
Right, that's right.
Default, when they join. So people are being naturally separated. We're creating these walled off partitions where all of them are siphoning off their attention, their time, really.
Right. That's why I think it's very important that we go ahead and make the move into the off-world stage, define it as such, and get everybody in on the same sheet. Because if you're in the alternative universe, you're in their duopoly. You're not in a separate ecosystem from the mainstream. And the only way out is off-world stage. And off-world stage is a different perspective entirely. And there are still people who are looking at news, they're calling stuff fake, but their perspective is still stuck there in Trutherville. But I'm thinking we can, make some progress here once we get the numbers up.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, but it's very difficult and painful to admit that you were wrong for all that stuff, much like leaving a narcissistic relationship, realizing that the charm was all lies. But it also conversely means that the harm were also lies. They see people like objects. Like, do you hate your refrigerator? Do you hate your microwave? Do you love your microwave? It's just an object. So when they're charming, are saying all these personally pointed compliments that make you feel seen that only you would know. It's just to manipulate you. And in like manner, when they break you down, it's not even because they're sadists. It's purely for utility. And leaving that such a relationship is traumatizing because you go, oh my gosh, that means was there ever any love? Did they ever really love me? And then it's the same thing for people in these world stage, if you will, sectors or bubbles, whether it be MSM or MSM Plus. It's like this pundit who I've been following all this time who understood my plight. No, they didn't. They never did. They're actors. They don't care about your plight. They don't even care about you.
And think of the term, consider attention economy. It's all about attention. And if you look at what the domineering, controlling narcissist is about, it's about harnessing all of your attention, managing your attention economy, and jealously preventing anyone else from getting it. And that's definitely part of the media does have that as and I think they did it on purpose. Because if you give the mass media itself that persona, it's like a God construct. And this God has this persona, it's going to have a response in the consumers of media. It's going to basically turn a lot of them into dependents.
Yes. And the God constructs are like different masks of the world stage system. So it's like a giant interactive drama where the mask caters to the particular subset that is afraid of Gaia, is afraid of, the Israel. You know what I'm saying? Like
oh yes,
women taking control of power. All of them have their own little mask that they can scapegoat and get really mad at and all that stuff. And it keeps people compartmentalized. And I think that's such a fascinating perspective because here at the Think Tank, I don't know who's this. I don't remember who it was, but many times I've heard people accuse you of being, like this being very closed-minded, like you're only allowed to think that events are fake and stuff. Not at all. So people are allowed to have different perspectives, different takes. In fact, the Think Tank thrives on the different perspectives people provide, but not all ideas are created equal.
Yeah, exactly. And I learn a lot from debates and disagreement. I reverse engineer arguments. And when people say, are you not open-minded enough? I have to point out that the mainstream media ecosystem is a closed system. By definition, if your opinion is centered from there, it's closed to the inclusion of media fakery and psyops. So you can't claim to be open-minded just because you're spouting red pill stuff. The open-minded perspective has to be inclusive of all the rest of the information. And so, no, we are the open-minded ones here. And I don't tell people what to believe, but I want to know essentially how do they arrive at their conclusions? Because if their sole criteria is I saw it on TV, yeah, we just reject it because not all opinions are equal. We're just looking at the same facts and we're trying to determine what the best explanations are. And I think we have the best explanation for all the alleged or suspected or misdescribed coincidences between entertainment and fake news events. And I think this idea of the explanation for it all being they're writing our history in advance. Yeah, I think we can substantiate that our history is manufactured decades or longer in advance. Like that's a big proposition, but I think we can support it. And I think that's cutting edge.
I think the key two talking points that helps reach, I was talking to a more liberal-minded friend of mine this earlier, is this phrase that simulated, staged fake news is more powerful than laws. And it's like that statement alone, it's like if you can get that out there, that meme out
that's
there,
good.
It's like fake news is very powerful. I think who am I going to quote? I don't know if it was Copus or someone from the chat, or Lean Dion. I think it was maybe Lean Dion. I got it from the chat, so I don't want to claim I came up with that, but whenever I saw that is a good point in the chat. Because if you think about it, it's like, yeah, it's like, who cares about changing laws if you control time? If you can basically get everyone in this cube, this perception of history and reality, that's far more powerful than controlling the laws. And the other thing is from my background, this really helped them put into perspective why these events are staged, because they keep saying like, well, of course the person was taken out, right? Like, why would you fake that? And so when you think of a demo, like if you're giving, I don't know, a software demo to clients, it's much easier to have a pre-recorded video of your software that you're going to show off rather than demoing it live. Because if you demo it live, the internet connection can cut out, the program can crash, maybe it doesn't do exactly what you want to show live. So if it's pre-recorded, it is so much easier, without a hitch, shows and does exactly what you want your clients to see. And in like manner, when it comes to staging political tragedies or these shows, it needs to be fake top to bottom, because then nothing can go wrong, because it's staged. If it was real, do you know how many things can go wrong if something is real? If you really killed someone?
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I mean, it could go wrong in so many ways. And what they're hiding is the relationship between government, media, law enforcement, DHS, hospitals, all the way down. That's a major operation that could be exposed if there are any weak links in that chain. So yeah, they're totally controlling it. It makes more sense. Total creative control. Randomly killing people, that's messy business. You'd have whistleblowers. It's a war crime. Non-disclosure agreements are invalidated if crimes are committed. It all makes sense just to do. It's just a movie. It's just a movie. Nobody dies.
And to explain from an implementation standpoint, I always refer to Mind War by Michael Aquino. I'm like, it's cheaper, more cost effective, and it still has the same intended result. So I think even in the news vendors, didn't that creepy guy say like, oh, all the money we've saved, we can actually stage anything.
Yes. Yeah. So you see what I've done since the last time we've spoken is I've taken the news vendors concept and I'm like, well, if you think about it, they've been doing this long enough that they're actually bending history. And that's looking at it retroactively. Then you look at the foreknowledge, the planning in advance, and then you get the idea, no, they're history benders. And that's the real conspiracy.
And it's scary to think that if all of our information comes from the screen, the history bending will be easier than ever. But like you could just retroactively change a digit or a date or something on Wikipedia. They occult it all the time. Now, even though there is a, what's it called, a edit history, right, for those in the know, but it's like, generally speaking, it's just there. No one goes that deep. And AI does pull a lot of its truth claims from Wikipedia. I don't know if you know that Wikidata has a knowledge graph behind it. And a lot of the facts of the triples are pulled from Wikipedia. And I remember when you were talking about like the Seattle Space Needle height, taking 42 seconds to go up to the top. If you go to Wikipedia, it says 41 seconds, and it says 43 seconds. And if you go through the edits, it's kind of like they're occulting it.
Yes.
So,
oh yeah, 34 is the new 33. And oh, by the way, guess how big the 3I Atlas spaceship is?
33, something related to 33. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like 33 miles across. Yeah.
Of course, it's got to be, right? And if you mention that in isolation, because when I was talking to a more liberal-minded friend, I said, like, yeah, do you know how long it took to get to find Tyler Robinson? It was like 33-hour mountain, and I forgot, because I was kind of on a roll with my thing. I forgot that, like, unless you've seen this pattern, it doesn't really mean anything. They're like, well, where does that mean? And I was like, oh, oops, sorry. And it helps a lot for people to understand that this is not an isolated incident with Kirk. It's like it's the world stage. It's systemic. If we only focus on one, it's like it actually does seem a little bit out there and crazy. But if you bring up other events that they may have entertained as being fake, so for a more right-wing-minded person, if you mentioned Sandy Hook, if for a more left-wing-minded person, you bring up Butler, PA, so you can kind of cater the teaching of the world stage to events that they might have already had doubts with.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm working with the idea of history benders and mind mapping it on whiteboards, because we got to show this is happening across time and it's the same liars. It's the same production company event after event. So Butler's not separate from the Trump thing. And if you look at these things in isolation, yeah, you can be fooled because your premise is it might be real or it's fake. And we're like, well, no, it's likely fake. If it's an extraordinary claim. And from that perspective, we're like, yeah, it's systemic fakery. You really have to get that it happens over time, and you got to have that continuity in your frame of reference.
For sure. And like the last thing I want to say before, I head out, I've actually been reading, or actually I finished, Herman Hesse's The Glass Speed Game, or Magister Ludi. I don't know if you've finished it yet. Very good. I had only read Siddhartha in like high school, so that was the only other Herman Hesse book I read. I read it because of your recommendation on the show, but I've been putting it off until I discovered that Herman Hesse's grandfather actually traveled to or lived in the southwest region of India and translated the Bible into Malayalam. That's why Hermann Hesse is obsessed with Eastern spiritualism.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Mixing the East and West. I was blown away by that. That's what kind of prompted me to kind of read the Glass Bead Game in like almost, I don't want to say one sitting, it was like 2 days, but it was like, it's a long book, but really good. And with relevance to the history benders, you probably know about Castalia.
That's why I'm reading. I'm like maybe 2/3 of the way through it. I'm always reading a bunch of books at once, but the reason I'm focused on the Glass Bead Game is that when I see them in Castalia, I see them with their game and how they're talking about history and making these connections. And his name is Joseph Connect, like connect the dots. It's like, I kind of get the idea. That's kind of what we're doing, but they're in this utopia and they're looking at things from an ivory tower perspective. And I see a lot of analogies between the Glass Bead Game and what we're doing.
Yes. And what I will say is it's such a shocking ending and it's just really good. I don't want to spoil it and all stuff, but something curious about the people at Castalia is he gets rebuked. I don't know if you saw the part where they send him on a mission to Father Jacobus on a mission to help establish a connection with the Roman papacy. They wanted to have a Castalia representative at the papacy, which, by the way, I had a hearty laugh in the intro where they're like, Pope Pius the 25th played the Glass Bead Game. I thought that was really funny. It's the book is actually pretty funny in some parts. But the interesting thing is Father Jacobus rebukes Joseph Knecht, or the German pronunciation Knecht, which that word actually means servant.
Okay.
Joseph Knecht, right? Which is interesting. It means both. So the English, if you read it, it's Knecht, and then in German it's Knecht, so which means like servant, master, right? Master and servant both. But when he's speaking to Father Jacobus, something he mentions about his criticism of the Castalians is that they seem to just kind of surgically analyze past works of humanity to make these connections, but they don't have any real grounding in absolute history. It's like, a real understanding of true history. It's like, yes, you can point out these manufactured connections that happen through the lens of looking back. It's like, but there is such a thing as true history. And he argues that there's like a great battle between good and evil, and Joseph actually listens carefully. And I won't spoil it, but I'll say it heavily impacts him and leads even to some of the interesting parts.
Okay.
Even the very
well,
end of the book.
I'm at the part where he just gets the role of master. And I had this weird coincidence because I'm reading multiple books, and one of the books is Glass Bead Game. So I'm on page 204 when he assumes the mantle of master and he starts taking on those duties. And then this other book I'm reading is about this alien traveling the galaxy, performing basically touring, he's a performance master. And on the same page number, he gets declared a master. I have these weird coincidences with these books all the time, but the idea here, though, of course, is this idea that they're looking at history as almost a constructs detached from reality. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of interesting. I wonder if the author may have been somewhat in the know about how malleable history itself is. I wonder if some of these authors aren't, on some level, insiders to the process.
Absolutely. We already talked about Stephen King being a meta-scripter for one, and Tom Clancy as well. I'm not sure about Hermann Hesse because he's, he was a bit of a what's it called, recluse, divorced. Such an interesting guy. After reading that, I got really into it. But I really like the book, and Magister Ludi, right? It's like the master of the game. It's so funny. You go through the whole book, it never fully explains what the Glass Bead Game is with specificity. What are the terms? What are the rules? What are they doing? Right? I love the book because it could never be made into a movie. I would never want it to be made into a movie. It's I want it instead in my mind, this vague knowledge graph association of these abstract concepts of different musical movements connected to the I Ching and stuff like that. It's almost I'd rather keep it as this ephemeral kind of ethereal game. That's just,
right. Yeah, it is like that. And so reading it, I just remember I'm trying to understand it. I'm like, wait a minute. The more I'm looking at it, it's like what we're doing to the outsiders listening to our conversations. It's indecipherable. It's like, wait, they're talking about Netflix, and they're talking about 9/11, they're talking about John Wilkes Booth. They're not going to make any sense of it. And so we're looking at the people playing the glass bead game as total outsiders. And so I'm like, okay, this would be like outsiders listening to meta scripters talk.
that is the one thing, and I was like wondering, like, what's the point? Like, how do you win? And I would imagine it's someone who makes the biggest daisy chain. Right? It's kind of like a bit like a 5-hit combo. It's like a show like this connected to this, right? Kind of like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but with like created movements of man's history and art and works throughout time, right? But it is very interesting that Father Jacobus criticizes him on that, and it does influence the ending quite significantly. But if you think about it, his name is Joseph, right? And Father Jacobus, Father Jacobus was the one who influences him. I don't know if you know in the Bible, Jacob was the father of Joseph.
Ah, okay, okay.
Jacob influences Joseph, and he criticizes Joseph. I mean, they have a friendly back and forth. They're lifelong friends, even until he passes away. So like they're friends. But the thing is, he tells him, like, there's a real history. There really is one. Like, don't just get. He's like, the way you Castilians do it, you're very smart, you're very intellectual, but you're kind of like a surgeon who takes apart the different organs of a body without acknowledging that there are different types of bodies.
Right. Okay. So we take out, like, we go through the meta script and we're like, okay, we're finding out the fake stuff that steers history, the worldview that we're in. But I'm like, at some point, we have to recognize that behind the fakery, there's the real thing. And that's what we never really address. So yeah, I'm going to finish the book within the next week or so I can kind of look into the subtext and everything else. But I think that it does.
For sure.
There's something, I don't know, there's something that I relate really strongly to what we're doing, how ivory tower it is, but how, how it looks. I know how this sounds and how it looks, but it ultimately is about history.
No. I felt the same way. And I agree that, like, it's not necessary to know, like, to make bigger connections. You don't need to actually know the truth. And that's something kind of I noticed on my own. You probably have heard me say so many times how I rail and just like, I feel like Father Jacobus at times in the think tank, where I'm like, that's not really what it means.
Right.
Yeah, who cares? It's like, who cares? Because it's a different symbolism system when looking at the world stage. So the internalized symbolism of decoding the Bible, it doesn't help with decoding the world stage at all. It's totally separate.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Because the way that they borrow from every source, it's interchangeable. And yeah, you definitely see the biblical stuff, the science fiction stuff. It draws from Greek myth. It draws from all these various sources in a very syncretic way. And ultimately, it's a big Frankenstein mess. It's just sewn together, all these parts.
And, there's another character who's like Polonly, I forgot his last name. He was like that friend of his when he was young who was an outsider.
Yes.
And then he was like in the school and then he leaves. That's also, you'll see that later, his son Tito. Anyway, the point is that you'll also see people maybe outside looking in could be represented by him. But I will just say, yeah, I really like it, even though as a plot, this is just a story of some dude going to an elite school. Is that really that cool? It is. I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was like very glad for the recommendation. And I think that's a very interesting sync, that the same page number is when he becomes the master of the game.
Yes.
You see in another book where master was mentioned.
Yeah, this is weird. I know it's off topic, but I'm reading 4 different books. So I got Master of the Game, and then I have the Marrow Tree about this alien character. But I'm also reading this book called The Black Prism, and then a book called Name the Wind. What they all have in common is this protagonist who is ascends to this certain role, like master, and they're all facing the same basic kind of thing, whether they're against an institution or they're in prison for some, violation of free speech in this one, but they're all characterized in the same way. And weirdly enough, they all have red hair. Now, the Joseph Knecht character, it doesn't specify his looks, but the book cover I have, he's got red hair. And I kind of associate that symbolically, kind of like even Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. They make a point about the red hair. I think it just symbolizes like the hot skull, the person who's challenging the system.
Yeah, and it's like, and as it's mentioned in the book, it's like the glass bead is only for the intellectuals. It really is ivory tower type stuff. Unless you are really focused on making these, you can't even hope to compete with the masters in the game. And it is really its own kind of art form, making these connections, because it requires free what is it, free association? Is that something? Or
Yeah.
I forgot the term. Was it free thinking? Is it called free association where you can like make those connections?
I think, okay, I used to use the term game, by the way, to describe the world stage, because I said it was the game program. The game is a government, academia, media, entertainment. I was like, you got to look at all these things as coming from a monolithic source, and it's a game. So there's other, use of that word game, I think is also very relevant. Like strange game, the only winning move is not to play. I've heard that expression used in relationship to interpersonal uh, destructive relationships, but I think it also applies to media and psyops. By suspending judgment, we're not playing the game. We're not engaging in it, but we're ivory tower. We're standing outside of it.
Yeah, and the game of life as well. And this view that don't the Masons, they walk on top of a black and white checkerboard, which is layered with symbolism, like the duality, and they're above it, but they're still walking on what appears to be like a game board.
Yeah,
they're walking above it. So it's that certainly is absolutely there. And the interesting thing is, I almost feel like in the game system or the government, academia, media, entertainment, there's been an attack on free association, on this way of thinking altogether. Because at least when I grew up, there was this great stigma with the liberal arts, where it was like, oh, do you want to work at McDonald's or something? It's like, yeah, get a degree in classical literature or in philosophy. Good luck, right? No, if you got to go into STEM. You got to go into science, programming, math. Ironically, and this is funny, I forgot the article I was reading, but like ChatGPT and like a lot of these large language models, they're used overwhelmingly by people in academia in STEM. Overwhelming, it works great for programming, for math equation recall and stuff like that. Very good at that. But when it comes to real creative thinking, like making these free association connections or writing your own stuff, it's actually quite bad at that. Or it's very dry, very similar. It's not very human. But when it comes to just raw information recall, that's actually what it excels at. And people get angry at some of the connections that we make. They get, I don't know, angry at it for some reason. I don't know why. It's like, how dare you even make such a connection? Oh my goodness. Like,
right.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people become, I coined the phrase Plato's cave dwellers. And then there's also Westworld syndrome. So Plato's cave dwellers are the ones who get mad when you show them anything not projected on the wall that you brought from outside their closed cave system. And then the Westworld syndrome is people who don't process anything that's from outside their paradigm. That doesn't look like anything to me, which is a Westworld thing.
Right. And it's they're programmed in that way to just shut down if you even kind of draw that stuff. But as you said, I really think it's just a frame of reference thing. Because if you believe that these news events are actually organic and real, then yes, what we're doing is kind of crazy. But when you have the understanding that it's staged with foreknowledge, with screenplay writers, directors, crisis actors, concurrent drills, right? Now it's like we're not looking at a real news story. We're looking at a stage play. We're doing media analysis, literary criticism, if you will, right? And then if people can get past that guardrail or that hump, then it's like everything we're doing makes sense. But as long as that wall is there, they'll never, like if they see a partition between Hollywood and the news, it's like they're never going to make sense of anything.
The compartmentalization. They really did put us into different mental compartments. It's fantastic. It's really an incredible thing that they have constructed. And the political horseshoe dialectics, the black and the white, by design, we're never going to be friends. They created this division, and you can see it right now very strongly ever since, even before, but since Charlie Kirk, you can see, even Luigi Mangione. The left loves to see political violence. That's where they're at right now. They celebrate it. So like that's pretty divisive right there. But well, hey, thanks very much for the call and helping me test out the phones. And we should definitely do some deep dives like on the regular. Anybody wants to do this, I'm interested in recording deep dive conversations in the Discord server to put into the 24/7 feed. And phones will always now be open from now on as well.
For sure. Thanks, man, for taking my call, and we'll be in touch. So peace.
All right. Have a great night. All right, everyone. That is Leo Pirate, who is also in our Discord server. So if you go to the ips.monster, there's a Discord server. We are going to be increasing the number of people in there just by opening the 24/7 and opening up some of these old platforms that I have been on, and people who maybe didn't jump to the latest YouTube channel will find us there. And that's what I've been doing. I've been seeing names of individuals showing up in chats that I haven't seen in a number of years. So it's good to see. And I think it's true that once you've stepped off the world stage, once you've had certain realizations, it's a paradigm shift. You're not going back. You're not going to go back to wrong answers and a bad operating system. What we represent here, when I say cutting edge by our analysis, I'm referring to how we process media, our model. And it happens to be better, more accurate, and testable, as opposed to the alternative, which is part of a duopoly. All right, going through your comments. All right, so we've had a steady 100 people on YouTube and DLive. I don't know how many have been listening on Twitter, but check your inboxes later. I will be sending out a notification regarding the 24/7 live stream, how that's going to begin. It's going to start off small. We'll pick up steam, but it's going to start off definitely with the audio. It's all new content, or the most recent stuff. And I'm going to be using that to, integrate all of the different platforms with our chats and then with our Discord server. And we'll see where it goes from there. And then in the future, starting tomorrow, I will have Discord open. So if you can't call in, you can jump into the Discord voice, and I'll make that another way to get in on the Infinite Plane radio, open phones for open minds segments. So thanks, everyone. We'll continue this conversation in perpetuity. It's not really ending anytime soon, but we'll be in Discord.